the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome back to the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow, of course, at 10 o'clock. So, as you will be fully aware, UK and EU markets and elsewhere have plunged like billio. The FTSE 100 falling 6% shortly after opening this morning as the fallout continues from Donald Trump's global tariffs. There is a question on this as well, in terms of whether you think I know we've been over this territory before. Is Trump playing a blinder here, or a very, very dangerous game? Meanwhile, back over here, the Prime Minister is pledging bold changes, including relaxed electric vehicle rules to ease tariff pressures, but the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel cars remains in place. Your thoughts on that as well? And the RAF's iconic Red Arrows jets could be replaced by Russian-designed aircraft, the kind of bits of kit that are favoured by Vladimir Putin. This has sparked somewhat of a backlash, bit of outrage from MPs and, of course, military leaders, as you might imagine. Full details on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So there is a belief that Donald Trump is apparently playing some kind of sort of genius game, if you like, of 3D chess, as I keep hearing it described. He wants to recalibrate how the world does business. He's taking a leaf out of the turn of the century almost, or a little later, 1920 or something, when America kind of became America in the way that we now know it, economically speaking. He's recalibrating and changing the way that the United States, and therefore by definition the rest of the world, does business. He's hatched a plan to make it work. His theory is meant to mean, of course, that this works fully to America's advantage. I certainly don't blame him for that. He is the president of America. That's literally his job. I wish our leaders would have a similar view in that respect. But is it a skillful game, or is it a very dangerous one? Now, I don't want to malign anyone here, but I think it's fair to say that most of us are not really across the kind of finer details of tariffs. We broadly know what it means as a tax slapped on the import of certain products, or even all products. They could vary depending on the product. It's the country that those imports are exports, their imports, that shoulders the blame for that. They take the hit with the wonga. And theory, I think this is roughly safe ground. The theory on this, of course, is that in this case, American companies will go, well, we're not going to buy that whiskey from Scotland. We're not going to buy those cars from the United Kingdom. We'll buy our own. And hey, happy days. People start being more discerning about where they shop. That, of course, boosts the economy domestically for the United States. And in theory, you know, income tax comes down, you know, interest rate, all sorts of amazing things happen. It all falls and clicks neatly and meticulously into place. But of course, it doesn't come without hassle and jips. Stock markets have gone through the floor. As I mentioned, FTSE down 6% this morning. Asia and other Euro markets plunging. Germany down 10%. Hong Kong 13.2. I mean, it's grim out there, kids. And you don't have to be Adam Smith to work out this thing could get a whole lot messier before it even has a chance to turn a corner. Talk of a global recession looms. In the UK, companies are more than feeling the pinch. Now, Mr. Trump has defended these tariffs on imports that sent shockwaves around the world, saying sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. Is he right on that specific point? Is he right? It might not be everybody's cup of tea. It might not be conventional. Not entirely unprecedented, but it's unusual on this kind of scale. But could this work? And if it did work, could it work for everybody, or will it just be for the United States? He was speaking to reporters on board Air Force One. He said jobs and investment would return to the US and make it wealthy like never before. And that is exactly what he's trying to do. His top officials say that the tariffs would be implemented as plans, playing down recession fears, because there is talk of a global recession. Now, Donald Trump is a lot of things. He's not stupid. As a businessman, he has always been, if you any biography you want to read of Donald Trump will give you just a cursory taster of the ruthless nature of Mr. Trump, sometimes bordering onto areas or territory that is, shall we say, just nudging the spirit or the template of the law of the land, etc. Is he an economic genius, or is he a kind of streetwise genius? I've always thought the latter, really, with Trump, and that served him well. He's managed to build an extraordinary empire by applying that. It's a street thinking. You know, you don't forget your sciences. You want to build a building, then get some people to build it, borrow some money, and then flog it off at a massive profit. Very simple stuff, considering the amount of money that's involved. That's how Trump seems to roll. But is he on safe territory with this one, with tariffs and all that goes with it? Is he playing this curious, incredibly intricate game of 3D chess, watching the next move, savouring the moment, then pouncing with another set of tariffs to counter what has happened in that department, etc. Is this shrewd beyond anything we've ever seen? Is this man really super clever that he's changed the face, not just of the United States, but how the rest of the world does business and will do business going forward? Is it a skillful or a dangerous game? 0344 499 1000. The reason I think this is intriguing is because it's arguably the biggest story in the world at the moment. I mean, there's lots of fairly important stuff to talk about, but this is right up there. But it's not one, I think, that most people engage in any enthusiastic manner. Have you got to know a little more about economics, or is it all rather simple? When you kick your quilt off the bed in the morning and lay there with a slice of toast between your toes, do you sit there thinking, I wonder what's happening on the tariff market? Probably not. But the implications could be felt worldwide. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Former Labour MP and now member of Reform UK, Simon Danchuk, is back with us. Simon, how are you doing?
Very good, thanks. It's good to be with you, Ian.
Nice to have you back with us as well. And let's start with the bombshell tariffs, as they're being called here, caused stock markets around the world, Simon, to fall dramatically. Let's hear from Donald Trump. This is him speaking to Fox News yesterday. He was on board Air Force One at the time about his plan. Here's what he said.
We have been treated so badly by other countries because we had stupid leadership that allowed this to happen. They took our businesses, they took our money, they took our jobs, they moved it to Mexico, they moved it to Canada, they moved a lot of it to China, and it's not sustainable. We're not going to do it. Now we have hundreds of billions of dollars that's pouring into our country. On a monthly basis, it's pouring. It's already started because they put tariffs on. And eventually it's going to straighten out, and our country will be solid and strong again.
Sorry about the sound missing at the beginning. If you want to write to Ofcom, just mention the word Amy forgot to put the fader up, OK? I think we should get that straight here. Simon, there he is. We're trying to work out whether Trump is playing an absolute blinder here, a kind of curious Svengali-like game of 3D chess, or is he a bumbling buffoon when it comes to economics?
I certainly don't think he's a bumbling buffoon by any stretch of the imagination. You don't get where Trump is and win 2 elections as he has. Yeah. By being stupid. You know, the guy's a very smart operator. There's no doubt about that, whatever you might think of his politics. And what he's doing now is doing what he said he would do, what he's been elected to do, which is an agenda of protectionism, protecting the United States. And he's had this agenda for many years. If you look back at some of the comments he's made, going back literally decades in terms of tariffs and protectionism. This has been an agenda that's been flagged up time and time again, and now he's implementing it. It's fair to say the stock markets across the world don't like disruption. We saw that with Liz Truss in the United Kingdom not that long ago.
Yep.
So they don't like this knock of confidence. They don't like the disruption in trade that's occurring. The big issue is whether it settles down and whether things calm down and we can get back to relative normality. I mean, the truth for Britain is, and KPMG, the accountancy firm, have said, these tariffs, 10% on Britain from the US, will cost us £22 billion by 2027. That's going to have a big impact on people's lives. So you're right. We might not talk about it down the pub later on today and when we're getting out of bed in the morning, but they are going to have an impact. And that raises two questions, really. First of all, had we had a different government in Britain, would it have been different? We have a very special relationship with the United States. We're the closest of allies in both directions. And yet we've got a cabinet and Starmer who've been attacking Trump for the last 10 years, really ridiculing him, calling him lots of names. Could we have got a better deal with him if we had a cabinet who hadn't done that? And I think that's a really interesting question. And then the second important point is, why didn't the cabinet, why didn't Starmer see this coming? I mean, they have just not prepared. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And that's exactly what we're seeing. You could see a potential victory for Trump in those elections. Why didn't they prepare better than what they have done?
It's an interesting coincidence in terms of the numbers, isn't it? Just as Rachel Reeves claims she's starting to fill the £22 billion black hole, another one comes along. Exactly the same amount of money, 22 billion quid. We've got 62% of UK businesses trading with the US fear negative impacts. Is there a way, Simon, or a way that you can imagine that we can somehow address this? Is there a way to stop that news being as bad as it could be?
I think you'll have to change the Chancellor, and I think Starmer's going to have to do that. I don't think there's any doubt about that. All the predictions now are that job recruitment in Britain is at a 12-year low. That's because Reeves decided to increase national insurance contributions for employers. So they're not employing people. So the situation is just getting worse. They came into power at the general election last year. They talked the economy down. This is well known. They talked the economy down. They killed confidence. And now we have Trump killing confidence in the markets with the tariffs. It's a double whammy for the UK economy. And I think it's going to take a lot more than Rachel Reeves' procrastinations to get us where we need to be.
There is a bit of, well, apparently some good news, though, economically speaking, in the automotive sector. Starmer planning to relax EV rules, cutting non-compliance fines from 15,000 to 12,000 to aid car makers. Hybrid car sales extended to 2035. No movement on petrol and diesel, though. That remains the same, but the hybrid component to this story, welcomed, of course, by many. To me, it was already a bit of a ridiculous rule. This makes it a tiny bit less ridiculous, but it's still ridiculous.
I think it's ridiculous. It's self-inflicted pain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. You've got a government that are imposing regulation on the market, extreme regulation that's difficult to understand or follow, to be quite blunt. I mean, changing the penalties that British car manufacturers have to pay from 15,000 to 12,000 if they miss green electric car targets, I don't think is going to make a massive difference. Leave it to the market. People will buy electric cars. I will buy an electric car if it's good value, and they say it is. They say I save £1,100 a year by charging up an electric car at home every night instead of using petrol.
Yeah.
Leave it to the market and we will get there. But don't try and over-regulate. And that's what Ed Miliband and Starmer have been doing in this instance.
Yeah. And connected to the previous story, Jaguar Land Rover halting US exports as Starmer warns Trump's 25% car tariff signal that the world has fundamentally changed. So we can see in real time, Simon, a tangible effect on our economy.
Yeah, but Starmer talks about fundamental change. The biggest fundamental change Britain has had is electing a Labour government that's running the economy into the ground. That's the fundamental change we are facing. Never mind Trump and everything else that's going on in the world. There will always be these things going on in the world. We're not in a unique situation all of a sudden today or yesterday or tomorrow. The truth is we should have a government that's prepared well in advance to ride these storms, and that's where there's been a failure from Rachel Reeves from day one. There's no doubt about that. She'll go down as one of the worst chancellors we've had in a long time. Actually.
Yeah, and we've had some stinkers, let's be honest. So, I mean, it's a grim old crew of names we've got there, and she's top of the pile at the moment. Stay with us, Simon. Simon Danczuk, the former Labour Member of Parliament, now Reform UK member, on the big stories of the day. Give us a thought as well on what you think about this hybrid car sales, new car sales extending to 2035 while pure petrol and diesels remain banned. This is banned as in you can't buy them new. They will still be around. Does that hybrid story make a world of difference on this one? And then the wider question about Donald Trump. Is he playing an incredible game? If he is playing an incredible game, is it only an incredible game if you're American? Incredible as in, you know, this is going to turn out really well. Can the rest of the world benefit in any way from this? I mean, if you look at Jaguar Land Rover halting exports to the States, then that's clearly not good news. I don't know how you circumnavigate that one. 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls shortly. Lots of voices to get on this as well. More from Simon in just a couple of moments. 1:20. This is Talk.
You know, we have got meant to be representatives of society in Parliament, and all sorts of accusations are being made at all sorts of people in this day and age. We are in a much more litigious age. We're in a much more cancel culture age, when it's commonplace now for people, and rightly, to speak up if they feel they've been treated or the law has not been followed. But it is also true, sadly, that some people take advantage of the situations they find themselves in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of Common Sense. Simon Danczuk, the Reform UK member, is with us, looking at the big stories of the day. Interesting one that has come out over the weekend, Simon, with some pretty troubling undertones to it, clearly. This is the Labour MP, Dan Norris. We know that he's been arrested on sexual offences, but In addition to that, the Telegraph has revealed that he's also been accused of bullying and harassment by staff at a local authority. Keir Starmer seemed rather impressed by the man, as it turns out, in this video. I doubt he'd say the same now. Have a listen.
I'm here in Keynsham with Dan Norris, Labour's candidate to be the West of England mayor. The choice in these elections couldn't be clearer. The Conservative Metro mayor who's been invisible and failed to secure investment in the area, or Labour's Dan Norris.
Yeah, who's going to be invisible himself for a long, long time, it looks, Simon. Obviously, we can't get into the implications of allegations. He's been arrested, therefore there is a protocol around the legality of discussion, but it's a terrible look for Keir Starmer. Not the first time he's been in this position.
No, absolutely. It's a really bad look, and we won't comment too much on the allegations that have resulted in his arrest. But what's come out today is further allegations around harassment and bullying within the local authority from where he operated as a mayor. And the report suggests that it came out in a staff survey a couple of years ago, and then the trade unions complained about how he was interacting with members of staff whilst he was mayor. And just for clarity, he's the MP for part of Somerset, but he's also the elected mayor for the West Country region. So he's got two positions at the moment, and it's in relation to the mayoral position that he's also accused of harassment and bullying. But we were talking earlier about auditors. Grant Thornton, who did an audit on the West Country Combined Authority, said in relation to people he was speaking with, staff, suboptimal interaction, whatever that means. I think it means the conversations between him and staff were not very good. And then he's now finding himself, because he's chair of the League Against Cruel Sports, is in the High Court. A case is being brought against him in relation to bullying there as well. So the big question here, Ian, is why did they let him stand as a parliamentary candidate last year?
Because they knew this was going on.
Big question. Yeah, absolutely. It's quite clear from all the evidence that's out there that the Labour Party would know about a lot of this.
You'd think so. You'd think so. What's interesting, of course, is that he nicked the seat off Jacob Rees-Mogg at the last election, for it was him, Mr Norris, who booted out Rees-Mogg in that constituency. It's thrown up the question as to whether, if this turned into a by-election, and look, we can't say anything about the implications of the case, of course, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a by-election here at some point. Would Rees-Mogg re-emerge in that constituency?
Yeah, I suspect he would, wouldn't he? I think he would stand, and there is a good chance that he would probably win it. I think he's a very popular. He struggled because of the national swing against the Conservatives. But he's a well-regarded member. He was a well-regarded member of Parliament, and I think he would do very well. And Labour's certainly not going to win it if there is a by-election, that's for sure.
One here about the RAF, the Red Arrows. Jets are in danger of being replaced by Russian planes. We know that, obviously, they change planes and decide that they want to use different sources for military power in all sorts of ways. But this would be something terrible, wouldn't it? That something as iconic as the Red Arrows would be designed by the boys who work for Vladimir Putin. This is a terrible look, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't understand this at all. So we currently use the Hawk 1 plane, which is British made. The problem is the factory who makes that closed down in 2020, and a British replacement hasn't been sorted out in time. So they're looking at using what's known as the Yak 130, and as you say, it's designed by the Russians. I mean, it's just outrageous that we might use a plane designed by the Russians. What's next? The British Bulldog being replaced by the Siberian Husky at this rate? I mean, it's outrageous.
Well, we live in really strange times, Simon, and nothing would surprise me these days. So stand by for the Siberian Husky, I say. And this one as well, this is a sad story and troubling as well. Royal Mail loses grieving mother's son's ashes, but says she won't get any compensation because there's no monetary value to the ashes. So they hand her a 50 quid gesture of goodwill. This is terrible.
It's terrible. I mean, Royal Mail isn't what it used to be, is it? It was always held in high regard, but this is a clear example of where they are just getting it completely wrong. They also complained, as well as saying that there's no intrinsic value to the Sun's ashes. They also said that it was over the weight for ashes. They must have a standard weight. I think it's 50 grams, and the cask must have made it heavier than that. And so they were complaining that she sent it in too heavy a package. I mean, talk about customer service. It's just gone out the window. It's an awful situation. Really.
100%. Simon, always great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Simon Danchuk, he is a former MP, of course, was of the Labour Party back in the day. He was a very sane voice of the Labour Party. In fact, you used to think, is that bloke, should he be in the Labour Party? Yeah, well, he's not anymore. He's in Reform UK now. 0344 499 1000. Your response, particularly to the car story as well. What are you making of that? Is this Starmer understanding the realities of his net zero policies and what it could do to the industry? This will not please, I would imagine, environmentalists. I mean, this is so firstly we had the, is it the Heathrow or the Gatwick? Heathrow expansion. Gatwick, Heathrow. There's been so many expansions. We've got Luton Airport that I think is also earmarked for some increase traffic there as well. Now we've got this. And Ed Miliband, who's the guy who's attached his name to everything net zero based, you'd have thought by now would have legged it for the hills, screaming, sucking his thumb, howling at the moon. What has happened to his party? They're clearly going a little more casual on the hybrid issue, the airport issue with expansion. That would be enough. You might imagine that the man in charge of net zero would have said, no, this is not how it's meant to work. I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll be glad that it ain't. But if you're Ed Miliband, surely everything you stand for is in this sphere. So your thoughts on that? And that is the hybrid, by the way. I've always wondered about the hybrid. Is that it sounds like the most obvious compromise to many people. Is that true? Is that better than pure electric if you're a hybrid driver? We'll take some response on that as well. 0344 499 1000. And that wider issue, which is sort of affecting everything economically, and that's tariffs. Is Trump playing a skillful game or a dangerous game? And is there anything in it for us? Could there be? Could this, in some curious way, I mean, look, if I knew the finer intricacies of what is going to happen on stock markets, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'll be sitting down the road in one of those impressive trading floors, making a fortune by the hour. But on the face of it, can the UK in any shape or form come out on top? We'll talk to one voice who will give us their view in a couple of moments' time. Over to you as well, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Peter says, I seriously can't believe the Prime Minister is taking us down this path of net zero and banning diesel and petrol vehicles. This will kill our industry, especially our car industries, and we're not geared up for electric vehicles. We have the world's most powerful man telling us it's a scam, and it is a scam. If you think driving a diesel car has anything to do with climate change, says Peter, that's going to divide the room forever. It is worth pointing out, and there's no defence of the government here, but most of these targets were set by the previous government. I mean, the Conservatives were the ones that adopted all of this. Most of the stories that are irking you at the moment would have been happening anyway. They would have been, and do you know what? Even down to, unfortunately, Keir Starmer has got a name, Keir, that rhymes with tier, so two-tier Keir is applying to everything. But I think had Rishi Sunak won the election, was it Rishi Sunak who was the Prime Minister? We had so many Prime Ministers. Had Rishi Sunak won the election, I think all of this stuff would have still kind of happened. I don't think there's much that I can see wouldn't have been the same had the Conservatives won. We might have had a slightly different economic outlook on things. There would have been a very different approach in the Treasury to the budget, you'd like to think. But then again, you know, the Tories taxed us out of our own socks on a regular basis. 0344 499 1000. And Stephen in Belfast says the RAF are in the process of scrapping 49 Tranche 1 Eurofighter Typhoons. Can we not transfer 9 of them over to the Red Arrows instead of scrapping them? Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. So markets in the UK and the EU dropped sharply again as the effects of global tariffs imposed by Donald Trump took hold. The FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since the pandemic, 6% again. Within minutes of opening this morning, experts warned Trump's tariffs could cost Britain £22 billion by 2027. KPMG, the accounting company, predicting a 0.8% hit to the economy over the next 2 years. Let's speak with Dr. Will Prescott, Senior Researcher at Bright Blue. Will, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I mean, if somebody had told us a year ago this is the place we would be in, we probably wouldn't have believed them. Like tariffs all over the place. I mean, in fairness to Mr. Trump, this is no surprise. He said he was going to do this and he's done it.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the one level, it's a total surprise. On the other hand, what even is a surprise these days? I mean, after the events of the past 8 years, it's just one shock after another. But it seems like, and I think what a lot of us overlooked is that sometimes politicians have a political obsession or an ideological obsession. In Trump's case, it's with tariffs. And unfortunately, sometimes politicians do implement what they say they're going to do, and it's not necessarily what we want them to.
Look, Mr. Trump is a lot of things. He's not stupid. Even those who aren't supporters or didn't even vote for him would say, well, you know, clearly this fella built a massive business empire. He clearly knows his way around creating money somewhere along the line. He's got a belief in it. It goes back, it seems to me, from what I've read. Will, maybe you can enlighten us a little more, but this goes back to the sort of almost the big bang of the United States at the in the last century when they were freed up, and he's sort of replicating some of that wealth like they've never seen before, paraphrasing what he said just yesterday. Can it work?
Well, unfortunately, probably not. I mean, you know, as you talk about the early 19th century, some countries, tariffs can have some use when you're trying to build up industry from scratch. So the United States used tariffs in the 19th century when it was industrializing. Some of the Asian countries have done it more recently. The problem is tariffs are much less effective at reviving industries once they've fallen. You know, when this country experimented with tariffs in the 30s, all it seemed to do was reward inefficient industries. And while I guess it improved the balance of payments of sort of, in that case, it was non-empire goods, it didn't actually do anything to boost the competitiveness of our manufacturing base.
Mr. Trump seems absolutely wedded to these, and he's described the word tariff as one of the most beautiful words in the English language. I mean, this could cost Americans a lot of money as well. I'm trying to work out who's the overarching winner on this, unless the theory is very simple, crude as it might be. Everyone gets fed up with, you know, paying extra for goods that are coming from elsewhere, so they just buy American goods. Is that literally the theory?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a warning, and never underestimate the power of ideology. Trump genuinely believes, and as you say, this has been going back decades, that if you run a deficit in goods, that means you are being screwed over, in his words, and therefore and also that that's screwing over American workers, and the only way to rectify that is to impose tariffs so that Americans import less. But there's also a sort of another angle to it as well. By raising revenue from tariffs, and Trump's talked about this, and sort of even the British Tories flirted with this 100 years ago, you can use it to fund tax cuts to the wealthy as well. So there is another angle to this as well as just the goods angle.
In terms of what is likely to happen, when we're getting this prediction of a £22 billion black hole. I don't know what it is about the number 22 billion, Will, but it seems just not the first time.
Comes up a lot.
It seems to, doesn't it? Yeah, wait, it's a bit like the old Brexit thing. Lots of things happen to be 48-52 after Brexit, and now we're dealing in 22 billions when it comes to money that's disappeared. But it's a lot of money. Is there a way around this? I mean, obviously you've got countries imposing tariffs themselves. China in particular are going in hard on this. Mr. Starmer is at the moment hands off in this respect. Is there a way to neutralise it?
Well, that really depends on the personality of Mr. Trump. It doesn't look like that. I mean, we have the lowest tariff rates of any of the countries, the 10% ban being the lowest. So in that sense, we've already sort of got off relatively lightly. Look, I mean, in terms of opportunities, look, it's worth always trying to reach out to the Trump administration and seeing if there are certain things we can do. I mean, he may demand concessions on things like restricting the imports of chlorinated chicken that we're unlikely to concede on. But, there's also the possibility that for some American investors, and, I was reading about this in the FT on the weekend, there are some American investors who are potentially looking to park some of their funds in the UK. So, while I think it is sort of primarily negative to the UK, there might be some very small areas where we can try to capitalize on the concern about the direction of the United States.
Yeah, and the wider point about all of this is a rewiring, if you like, of how the world does business. I mean, that's essentially, the old global order has gone. Mr. Trump acting more like a Chinese leader than, if you like, a Western leader. It seems, I don't say that as a pejorative, it's a genuine observation. That seems to be what he's doing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think, apparently some within China are sort of, almost sort of see his approach as sort of echoing the sort of Mao sort of Cultural Revolution change from above sort of attitude. I mean, it is a more authoritarian move, and it's not something we're used to seeing from an American president, let's put it that way.
Indeed. Will, thank you for your time. Dr. Will Prescott, Senior Researcher at Bright Blue. Over to you on this one as well, 0344 499 1000. This in from Richard says, only way to make any country grow, 30% flat tax for all income, including benefits, 20,000 tax-free allowance for all, 2-year limit on non-medical benefits, no benefits if non-medical, and no contribution into the pot. Basic support only, £10,000 tax relief services you don't take from the state. Cut to 10% corporation, 15% VAT, 5% capital gains tax, 1% stamp duty, 10% tax on all global wealth for life if you land it in the UK, 30% cut to indirect staff in civil or public service, and phase net zero, GW for GW, out to 2050. I'm trying to work out what GW stands for. Leave that with me for a second. It'll all become clear, I'm sure. Don't text in and tell me. Listen, thank you, Betty, for that. Lots of comments on this one, 0344 499 1000. This one from Gary, who says, how can you honestly say Donald Trump is a great businessman? He managed to bankrupt 3 casinos. He has a history of making terrible business decisions. And a fun fact to note is that if he had left his inherited wealth in a basic savings account, he would have made more money than his investments. In terms of those tariffs, he's no idea what he's doing, and his stubborn narcissism will not change this course, as he does not want to be proven wrong. I'm not sure if you're paying attention to his latest speeches, but the other day Donald Trump did not know what the word groceries meant. What a moron, or should I say, a stable genius. Did he really not know what groceries are? I mean, that would be extraordinary. I mean, this does happen to politicians every now and again. They either mishear something and then forever. Who was it? Dominic Raab, wasn't it? Who was forever accused of not knowing how important Dover is in terms of what it did, facilitating trade. Well, of course, he did know that, but the way he answered the question made it sound like he didn't. Trump not... I mean, grocery store, it's an Americanism, isn't it? Grocery store. You might say that before you'd say supermarket over there in the States. I don't know. You're kind of right, though, Gary, I think. You know, but Trump is, you know, he's Arthur Daly in that respect. So, yeah, he takes a hit, doesn't do it conventionally, but has he got a load of golf courses? Does he live in a palace? Is he chauffeured around like a king? Can he buy whatever he likes? Yeah, he can. So it's kind of... It's a curious... Don't ask me to understand how narcissism works, but I sense that... And Trump's not alone in that, by the way. I don't use that as a term of abuse. But he's kind of... It would be seen on balance. He's done all right. Yeah, he's messed up along the way. I don't care about that. Probably not even his money. Probably borrowed money. Yeah, the bank can withstand... Well, that'll go away somehow. And I did say, he takes it to the... well, in fact, according to some court papers, he takes it well into the arena of illegality, but others would say he simply pitches close to it. 0344 499 1000. Georgina is down in London. Reference Donald Trump and those tariffs, Georgina. What have you got for us?
Well, firstly, can I say at least Donald Trump knows the difference between a man and a woman. So he's got one up. He's got one up on Britain straight off. Now, when Donald Trump came or was voted into office by a massive majority, he did it because he said he was going to do the best for the United States and its people. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's got no responsibility to any other country. He doesn't care what this is going to do to any other country, Ian, because he is interested primarily on the well-being of the United States and the people within the boundaries. Now, this is something that other countries need to pick up on, take notice, and do the same thing. They need to do, and this is out to Keir Starmer, if he's listening, and I hope he is, he needs to do the best for his country. And every other country needs to do the same, because that is what these people are voted into power for. Donald Trump was voted in because that's what he said he'd do, and that is what he's doing. Remember, he's a businessman, Ian. This is not his first rodeo. He's not an easy man to think, well, I don't know what he's thinking, because nobody does. There's only one person who knows what Donald's thinking, and that's Donald. But he knows his way around the stock market. He knows his way around business. He knows what he's doing. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to look. He put a 10% tariff on the United Kingdom. It could have been so much worse, and our government has made it look like he's done us a really bad harm, when in reality, he has not. When you think the EU, was it 45% tariff he's put on the EU? So, you know... Not on everything. No, there are some products that will hit that. Some are already, you know, differing and, you know, in existence before all of this. But, yeah, you're right. But then is that like saying, Georgina, we've only got a bloody nose instead of a broken arm? Well, you know, I think that the United Kingdom need a bit of a bloody nose to wake them up, Ian, to be honest, because we've stood for so much. And you expect to be stabbed in the back by other countries. You do not expect to be stabbed in the back by the government that is ruling the country you are living in. Do you think, though, do you sense that this is going to turn out well for America? Oh, yes, I think it will turn out well. I think you're going to have to buckle up, Dorothy, because this is going to be a bumpy ride to Oz. But I really do think in the long run that they are going to come out a lot better off for it, you know. I mean, you've got to go along with the man who knows what he's doing. Like I said, he's a very established businessman. He knows the ins and outs, and he knows what he's doing. Yeah. People are getting a little bit worried because this is uncharted territory for them. So they're thinking, my goodness, you know, you're sort of jumping off a cliff and wondering if there's someone at the bottom to catch you. So that's what's happening at the moment. So I could imagine that, you know, there's a few there's a few people with butterflies in the tummy, but they're just going to have to hold fire and see where it goes. And I think that it is going to be okay. I think they're worrying unnecessarily. Listen, there's people who will disagree with me, but, we've all got our opinion. We're entitled to that, unless, obviously, the government finds out you're saying something against them, then you get arrested.
Yeah, there it is. Georgina, thank you very much indeed for that. What I don't want to happen, though, is that if you are a Trump supporter, I don't think we've, apart from 2016 when Trump was first in, I can't really think of any other foreign leader that kind of garners support from people in other countries. Almost as if he's our leader in some way. I mean, people talk about Trump derangement syndrome, and there's certainly a lot of that. I was looking at that protest they had in the States over the weekend, and a couple of journos went round saying, what is it that Donald Trump? Why is Donald Trump a fascist? Why has he got it wrong? And most of them couldn't really answer why. They didn't know. Simultaneously, there's nothing wrong with not liking Donald Trump. It's a completely reasonable position. If you don't like Donald Trump, if you don't like Macron, that's Schultz, that's fine. If you don't like Starmer, for some reason, the school have thought that it's good to not like Starmer, but it's great to not like Starmer, but simultaneously great to like Donald Trump. That sort of doesn't really make sense to me if it's just political. If there's no reasoning behind it, by the way. I don't like Keir Starmer. Donald Trump, I can totally see what... 100%. I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump. I don't think anyone would really be objectively looking at Trump, his entire story, and going, this guy's great, I wish he was my dad. I don't think anybody would really come to that conclusion. But I can absolutely see some of what he's done, and that no-nonsense, common-sense approach to running a country is very attractive. But he's not your dad, OK? He's Donald Trump. So the idea that we almost want America to succeed with this tariff thing and the rest of the world to suffer somehow, including ourselves, is a bit mad. That's a bit bonkers, that, right? By the way, did you see that bonkers has been taken up now as American slang? They're loving quite a lot of the Brit slang, and apparently bonkers is top of the list. They'd never said bonkers until like half an hour ago. They find it hilarious. A few other B words as well. Let's not go there. So it's a curious time. So whatever Trump does, if he's going to do something that's going to massively hinder our economy, regardless of whether Starmer or anybody else is in charge, then that's not a good thing, right? I don't know why I'd want to support that. Is he doing something for his own country? That's what he's paid to do. That's literally his job. In fact, he doesn't even take a wage. So, but you take the point. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Is Trump playing a skillful or a dangerous game here? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
This is in the Daily Mail. Violent Albanian gangland mobsters are hiding in vans, using Rolexes and hiring fake tourists to send dirty money back home to use in a life of luxury. Wait for this. There are 1,100 Albanians in jail, including murderers, rapists and feared Balkan mafia kingpins. I thought we had a returns agreement, by the way, with Albania. The NCA, the National Crime Agency, has for years warned about the significant threat posed by Albanian gangs because they are infamous for their professionalism and discipline and also savage tactics.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in from Gary, who says, I have 4 measures that our government could take immediately to save and even grow the car industry. Number 1, abandon our crazy pursuit of net zero so that energy prices fall. Number 2, allow our car manufacturers to make the cars we want to buy rather than have to make a certain percentage of EVs that we don't want. Number 3, reverse the employer national insurance contribution hike to help all businesses grow. And number 4, since 1 in 5 cars sold in this country is bought under the mobility scheme, why not change the rules so that only British-made cars are eligible? It's baffling why people are being allowed to lease Volkswagens, BMWs and Mercedes with taxpayers' money. If you are disabled and you need transport, what's wrong with a Sunderland-built Nissan or a Vauxhall made in Ellesmere Port? It's very hard to argue that point, isn't it? Goodness me, you might already think that would be the rule as it stood. But we do that quite a lot, don't we? There's no kind of, you know, when the government are giving out a contract to somebody, and I know they've got a, you know, taxpayer, what's best value for money for the taxpayer, but surely that equation isn't just based on the finances, because there must be several knock-on effects, you might think, of giving a contract to a British company that is perhaps is kind of hidden in the paperwork somewhere. You take the point. We tend to do that quite a lot. Gary, thank you for that. And Rob in Dublin says, last caller saying Trump knows his way around the stock market and he's a businessman. His fortune was handed to him and he went bankrupt 6 times, says Rob in Dublin. Thank you for that. Let's go to your calls. This is Herbie in Harrow. How are you doing, Herbie?
Good afternoon, very well, Ian. Nice
Good.
to have you back.
Yeah, pleasure. Nice to be back as well. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, you come back to all the problems now. How can we be self-sufficient when we got such high electricity costs? And how can we be self-sufficient if we can't be competitive? What in God's name is the government trying to do? How can we go with electric when electric isn't there to take all the surging power anyway?
Yeah,
they've got no hope. No hope whatsoever. The cables aren't sufficient. The substations aren't sufficient. If by 2030 we've all got to go electric, we ain't got a hope in hell, because if you've got a family with 2 or 3 cars, how are they all going to charge up at the same time?
Well, you'll still be able to have your petrol car, but you won't be able to buy a new one.
Yeah, but they're going to go very quickly, Ian. I mean, say the second-hand market will go through the roof. And, you know, once they deteriorate or pack up or go in an accident, that's it, it's finished. The government hasn't got a clue what to do with such a disastrous situation that we're in. We won't frack, we won't drill for oil, we won't drill for gas, and it again goes for the farming. If we want to be self-sufficient, how can we if we're demolishing everything and taking everything away? Where in God's name is the sense in it?
Indeed. Well, at the weekend I noticed Jeremy Hunt was saying, you know, we need to become the Singapore of kind of the Western world, as it were, in terms of tech, and make the UK great again by doing that. And I thought, well, he was the Chancellor for years, wasn't he? He didn't do anything in that respect, so why would we listen to him now? Does anybody have a clue at all, Herbie, as to how to get us out of the current rut? And not just get us out of it, but get us to a place where we go, wow, the future looks really bright, because that's the bit that's missing, isn't it?
Well, totally. Ian, look, we can't survive if we can't become competitive. And if we are the most expensive nation in the world for electricity, how can we be competitive? It doesn't work. Yeah. They've got to start to think, how are we going to get out of the trouble that we're in? They need to dig for oil. They need to dig for gas so that we can be self-sufficient. When we rely on other people to supply us, like what is happening now with Trump, we are going to pay the price, and it won't be very pleasant.
Herbie, thank you very much indeed for that. Sean in Gloucester says, when will the loony left finally realise their policies are ruining everything from net zero to open borders? Surely even they are not that stupid to see it's not working. It's time for another approach. I certainly won't be giving up my diesel Mercedes because some moron says it's bad. Pillocks, says Sean in Gloucester. Not heard that for a little while. I was in Bulgaria last week and I was kind of sideswiped a little bit by Bulgaria. And I'll tell you why. Because Bulgaria is not in the EU, and that's only relevant for this particular aspect of the story, because it's therefore not subject to all of the, the usual EU rules and regulations about things like, health and safety. I mean, I could count on one hand how many people I saw wearing a seatbelt while driving. I'm sure if you're in the capital, it's maybe a little different. Do you want a child's car seat in the taxi? You don't have to. It's optional, sir. Do you want it or not? I've got one in the back that looks like it's about 50 years old. If you need one. Everybody's smoking wherever you went. You couldn't move for folks smoking. And there was something bizarrely... there was something quite liberating about being in a country that is just under 3 hours away from here, to all intents and purposes. I mean, it kisses Greece on its border. It's, in the region or the ballpark of the European Union, but it's not in the European Union. So I liked the idea of a different currency, going somewhere that felt like a journey to the EU, but you had to change your money up. And, there it was. It was properly another country on our own doorstep. And you don't see that or experience that very often unless you go further afield. But there was, and of course it's a place that's got lots of economic woes, and, talking to the locals there, they would like a change of government as well. But certainly as an objective outsider, there was just something... There was something sort of slightly refreshing about not being in a, nice, brand new, shiny health and safety rules, regulation, kind of world order setup. Quite liked it. Our lines are open. More coming from you on the other side of the news at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, coming up at 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome back to the home of common sense. So, UK, EU markets plunging. The FTSE 100 falling 6%. Over there in Germany, 10%. Elsewhere around the world, up to 14%. This is just today. The fallout continues from Donald Trump's global tariffs. But here's the question. Is Trump playing a skillful or a dangerous game here? It certainly divides the room. Thoughts on that? Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is pledging bold changes, including relaxing electric vehicle rules to ease tariff pressures. But the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel cars remains in place. We'll take more response on that. Steve Berry joins us a little later on the programme as well. And a senior Islamic figure has warned that young British Muslims are becoming more disillusioned and isolated due to the Middle East conflict, urging the government to treat integration as a national security issue. Man, we can talk about that. There's so many tentacles to that story. Details on the way. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Here's an interesting one. Every child is taught maths at school. No one is ever taught what money is. We have politicians who don't understand why we get price inflation. To me, it's not rocket science. Trump understands that the US dollar should reflect the US economy. Unfortunately, our UK parliamentarians gave that responsibility to the Bank of England, a central bank, for God's sake. My question, what on earth do we pay UK politicians for? Yeah, that was the first thing Gordon Brown did, wasn't it? Was it day one as Chancellor back in 1997? Gave independence to the Bank of England. Remember that moment? Thank you. It doesn't say who that's from, but thank you for that. Simon says, Ian, I wish he was my dad. He's on about Donald Trump, by the way. Yeah, I mean, it would never be dull, that's for sure, if Trump was your dad. Francis the Ignored from Wilton says, I remain balanced about Trump's risky long-term strategy, as in Make America Great Again. It may or may not pay off, as it's a few years in gestation. Reform supporters are betting the house on Trump, so for reform, his success is more critical. Yeah, but if it doesn't benefit us, and there's no way... I mean, if Nigel Farage was the Prime Minister, what would he be doing right now? Would he be putting tariffs back on to his friend and ally, Donald Trump? How would that one work out? It's those kind of moments that really test the meat of politicians. And I think Labour have discovered they can have all sorts of evangelical ideas about their environmental considerations, but it hasn't stopped them doing what they're doing with the automotive industry today, and the expansion of 2 airports, for goodness sake. They've realised, oh, hang on, we're in power now. Things work a little differently once you actually have your hands on the levers. 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on anything we've talked about, then do so, particularly that Trump question. We've got Alan Tolhurst with us, chief reporter at Politics Home. Alan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
And it's another £22 billion black hole story, but a different one this time. This is about Trump's tariffs, and that's the hit we are likely to take over the next couple of years. I mean, is there a way around... I'm trying to work out, Alan, if there's a way to circumnavigate this. You know, is there like a little thing somewhere in the Treasury go, oh, it's the Trump thing. Yeah, this is how we respond to it. There's a file that someone's handing over to Rachel Reeves right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Rachel Reeves would hope that that file exists somewhere, but I think that in their kind of long-term risk assessment over the past few months, they would have factored in a bit of turbulence when Trump took over, and they know that he was planning on doing this sort of thing. I genuinely don't think that anyone really in Treasury would have planned for this level of tariffs, even though in the UK, obviously, it's 10%, much lower than other places. The kind of wider turbulence is creating, even kind of allies of his, Bill Ackman, who's a billionaire hedge funder, he's warning of an economic nuclear winter unless these tariffs are paused, that, that's kind of going to involve everyone. It doesn't matter what you kind of do. If you're the UK, you're going to be swept up in kind of all of this. And you talk about having a plan. What's that famous Mike Tyson quote, about boxers having a plan to beat him, that everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Well, I think the world economy had that big punch in the mouth, and no one really seems to know how to deal with it currently.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I'm not hearing any country knowing how to deal with it. I mean, you know, France, Germany, Spain, all those areas that are also taking a hit, Hong Kong. The Chinese, we know, have whacked on some reciprocal tariffs at some pretty heady rates. But beyond that, there doesn't seem to be a formula somewhere on this one.
Well, it's the upending of an order that's lasted for a very long time, so therefore there isn't going to be a quick way of kind of shifting things around, and I think that's what countries are finding. Obviously, they don't really want to get into necessarily a tariff war because, you know, kind of nobody wins in that sense, but therefore there isn't really any other way other than accepting what's taking place and trying to work something out. But you can't just, there isn't, as you said at the beginning, there isn't just a kind of a folder you can pull out to kind of shift things on day one. It's going to take a long time to shake out, and I think we're seeing kind of we saw stock market fall at the end of last week. I think they weren't really sure whether this was kind of an initial negotiating position. You know, we saw markets rally slightly on Friday when he had a phone call with the Vietnamese leader, thinking that maybe they were going to lead to, you know, tariffs being put down. When that didn't happen over the weekend, I think now we're seeing that kind of real kind of sell-off in the markets, and we'll continue to see that all day. And if Trump keeps sticking to his same rhetoric, I don't see it changing, really.
Yeah, and that's the problem, isn't it? Because this could get a whole lot worse before it gets better. We're struggling to see how it's going to get better, but I suppose the real test, Alan, may well be if it gets worse for America.
Yes, exactly. And I think, you know, Trump wants, at the moment, he kind of wants it both ways. He wants the extra money from tariffs. He wants that kind of the tariff money to come to the UK, which he can then use to fund tax cuts. But he also wants jobs and production to move back to America. Well, the whole, you know, the point of tariffs is that it's one or the other. Either the people keep sending stuff to America and pay the tariffs, or production shifts to America, and it can't be one or the other. And it'll be amazing to see which way that kind of goes and how the American government responds to that, because, you know, you can't simply set up production for, you know, electronic goods that are currently made in East Asia. You can't suddenly set that up to start making production in America straight away. So what will happen in that kind of turbulent period before we kind of shakes out, I think that how they respond to that, and also how the American public responds to that, will kind of shape Trump's long-term strategy on this.
Yeah, fair point. Let's move to this story, Alan. David Lammy attacking Kemi Badenoch for cheering or cheerleading after Israel bans 2 Labour MPs, Yuan Yang and it's not even hard to say. Abtissam Mohammed were barred from Israel, accused of promoting anti-Israel sentiment and supporting boycotts. Of course, this happens a lot, doesn't it? I can, you know, Chris Bryant talking about Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to visit the United Kingdom not that long ago. I guess it's where you sit politically, isn't it, as to how you view these kind of stories?
Well, I mean, I think everyone should be, you know, should be a bit outraged. I think that Israel is denying these 2 members of parliament. You know, Israel's meant to be our ally. These MPs were on a delegation with a body that has MPs going across to visit places like the West Bank all the time. To detain these 2 specifically for their views, I think is pretty outrageous, really. You know, Israel calls itself an ally of the UK. You know, I think if they think that these MPs are critical, well, there are different ways of dealing with that rather than kind of, you know, deporting them essentially. And I think for Kemi Badenoch, I think chose her words pretty poorly yesterday, and I think that you'll see the rest of the Conservative Party kind of rowing back from it, because I don't think it is acceptable for this to happen, you know, for Israel. I mean, we've seen countries like China barring some Conservative MPs because of their kind of position on Xinjiang and that sort of stuff. Well, you know, does Israel really want to be put itself in the same bracket as China on these sorts of matters? I don't think that it does. So I think
and the test of democracy is that you don't have to like it, right? I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? It's not meant to be. In fact, it's almost at its illuminated healthiest when you disagree with it.
Yeah, and then there's long been criticism of a lack of access, not to the West Bank necessarily, but to Gaza from outside people, from reporters, from other countries, delegations. You know, and Israel has been criticised heavily for that. So to go beyond that, you know, for elected UK politicians who have been outspoken on this issue, I don't think in a disrespectful way, you know, I think is pretty shocking. And I think that I think it's right that David Lammy kind of called this out, and I think Kemi Badenoch is probably eventually going to have to walk back some of those words, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Starmer's blueprint to cut immigration has been delayed until after the May elections, aiming to reduce net migration significantly by the next election. They've got apparently some stricter rules around foreign graduates requiring higher paid jobs to remain in the UK post-study, etc. It feels like there's a lot of stuff we've heard every government more or less saying similarly. I can remember Theresa May sort of almost saying those very words as well. Is this going to make any difference? Because those that have, genuine concerns about immigration, and whether you're left or right, people can be very animated about what our immigration policy should look like. Is it going to make a blind bit of difference if it's delayed until after May? And will the policy in itself make any difference to the policy?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things really. I think firstly, interesting that it is being delayed. It kind of shows that the kind of those wider impact of the Trump tariffs, that there's already been kind of changes to businesses. The businesses are unhappy with Labour because of changes to taxes. They clearly don't want to do anything that would further kind of make life difficult for them by making these sorts of changes where companies would find it harder to hire foreign workers, would have to have domestic training programs. So it's interesting that they're, that kind of wider impact of that. But I think secondly, when you talk about people being interested, being engaged in the kind of immigration debate, I don't necessarily are thinking about engineering graduates or people who are graduating from universities. They're thinking about other sets of people. And, we talk about illegal migration or, small boats. They represent, even when it's a big year, it's about 50,000. And we know that net migration was up towards 1 million. So it's a very small amount. And so it's kind of separating out those different bits. And yeah, you could bring those overall numbers down. But if you didn't bring the numbers down of small boats alongside that, people would still have the same sorts of concerns. So yes, obviously you could help that headline figure. But for those people who are worried about changes to their communities and people staying in hotels, all that kind of stuff, this wouldn't be part of it.
Absolutely. This will make not a blind bit of difference. So, listen, Alan, always a pleasure. Thank you. Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home. Thank you to him. I noticed a lot of, there was a headline I read this morning that Eritrea is apparently proportionately the country where most of those channel migrants are coming from. I don't know what the kind of central argument would be for escaping Eritrea. We're not at war with Eritrea. I'm sure it's, I was just talking about Bulgaria, but I'll come back to that in a second. I was just talking about Bulgaria being, feeling like a place from 20 years ago, but actually richer for it. Eritrea, I'm sure, is probably a place that is really got some serious catching up to do. The North African country has been through war and some horrendous times, namely Ethiopia and other battles it's had to deal with over the years. I'm not surprised to hear that it might not feel like the most democratic country. But is any of that a reason to escape it and come and live in the UK by getting here on a boat? Rupert Lowe was making the point, the MP, still an MP, independent now, that all of those people, mostly young men, should just be clearly returned to Eritrea. It's very hard to argue with Rupert Lowe on that point. I don't know what every individual circumstance is, but clearly there's a bit of a contagion of people going, yeah, that's a good route if you're Eritrean. And if I lived in Eritrea, I'd probably go, you know what, I'd quite like to try and get in the UK, change my life, move forward a bit. Thank you to the many of you that have completely picked up on the fact that Bulgaria is in the EU. Sorry, it's not in the Eurozone, is what I should have said. So it doesn't have the euro. And as a result of that, and this is interesting, it's not the only country that doesn't have the euro either. Am I right in saying Poland doesn't have the euro, does it? But I think, yeah. And there are some others. But yes, my sense of Bulgaria, and whether you would apply that because of its sort of still sense of autonomy to being outside of the Eurozone, so the European Monetary Union, as it were, sort of has has a knock-on effect to how it kind of does business and how it rubs along. This in from Danny in Farnborough says, Bulgaria has been a member of the EU since 2007. If you think there's a lot of smoking there now, you ought to have been there in 1995 when I visited. I later lived in Sofia for 7 years. I never got to experience the capital other than the airport, so I was in and out like a robber's dog. But there was something that was, I don't know, there was something about being in a country that is not all bells and whistles. I mean, the health and safety thing, bearing in mind there's quite a lot of health and safety rules, and I'm not advocating that kids should walk around. Well, it's in fact, the picture, I forgot to show the guys the picture. I walked into a gift shop with my kids, because you know when kids go on holiday and they want to, buy some stuff. That was the largest collection of knives I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was extraordinary. I mean, I'm talking about the kind of weaponry that we debate regularly about, whether it needs a special, only an adult can buy it. You shouldn't be able to buy it online. Yvette Cooper getting literally there on a shelf in the shop. And the only reason I knew they were there in this shop is because my 6-year-old, while having a mooch around, comes back and says, "Daddy, can I buy this?" He's essentially holding a machete. It's like, got a funny feeling not. And the guy in the shop who was looking at him didn't go, "Oh, no, you mustn't hold that." Didn't have any cover on it either. It's extraordinary. So it's stuff like that. And whether the, being out of the Eurozone sort of lends itself to a certain autonomy, because not that even Brussels are they don't make rules for every country on how you display a knife. I understand that. But there is a certain kind of adherence to groupthink, which has always been my biggest criticism of the EU, one of many, where countries tend to adopt very similar ways. And Bulgaria was one of those places that really felt like it sort of still does its own thing very much. I'm pretty sure in the hotel that I was in, that the fire exit signs were just kind of... One was placed above what looked like a door, but it was a panel in the wall. It was just a panel. And it had an arrow saying fire exit. I mean, the only way you'd get through that would be on a motorbike performing a stunt. It was a flipping wall, for goodness sake. It was, and I kind of liked it. I thought, here I am in a place that isn't going nuts over rules and regulations. Mark's in Swansea on tariffs. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, very well. What are your thoughts?
I think everybody's coming at this from the wrong way, or a lot of people. If I was in international sales and selling a good product, I'll use a car, but cars isn't the right one because of the tariffs and 25%. But say a machine tool, whatever. All of a sudden, if I've got a good product that's happily going in and out of the States at the moment and worldwide, etc., all of a sudden, all my German competitors or European competitors are 10% more than mine.
Yep.
So, and you're going to lose a certain amount to the American market. But if my other competitors are from Asia and all their tariffs keep whipping up like that, I'd love to be in it. You'd be right up your nose, right in that trough.
Of course you would, wouldn't you? That's exactly where you'd be. Can we get out of this, though, Mark, in a positive way, or have we got to ride this out?
We're in a positive way now. Like, we're going to lose a bit of trade to some of it, but up against all of our, if you're selling and exporting into the States, which it only really matters about, I mean, in the other positive way, we can always buy British, which is always the starting point from everything. But against, if we're talking about competing against worldwide competitors, we've got an edge.
Well, that trade deal, I mean, the devil is in the detail, of course, so who knows what's going to be in a trade deal.
The 10% against their 20%, or China's all.
Yeah, but is that a good thing? We've only got a broken leg instead of a broken back?
But it depends on who your competitors are. If you're competing worldwide, most of my competitors, say, if they could build it in the States, they probably will, and you're going to lose a bit of it. But if they want something bespoke and European, and all of a sudden, it'd be even hilarious if Europe go into a trade war and we don't, and jack some back on the States, and the States retaliate. All of a sudden, you've got even more of an advantage to go and sell in America from the UK.
That's true. Why a Jaguar Land Rover, though, stopped exporting?
I don't know. I wouldn't. But that's a decision for them. But perhaps it's just, well, see what's going on.
Yeah, but what I mean, you're right. What I didn't understand about that, Mark, if like there's a couple of garages in Wyoming who say we want to buy 1,000 Jaguar Land Rover products, they're not going to I mean, it's up to them if they want to pay the extra, right? I mean...
Well, exactly, and it might be seen as a bit of a status symbol. Look, I can afford this even though there's a tariff on it, and in a reverse psychology type
of... maybe something in that.
Type of way. But we've got such a sales advantage if everybody switches on to it and agrees it, and let them all fight it out, the rest of them. The more tariffs, the better on European products going into the States.
Well, it puts certainly, against the backdrop of the EU, you're absolutely right. We are in a far more advantageous place, and maybe that is how this will roll out. 22 billion black hole or not. Listen, Mark, great call. Thank you for that, Mark in Swansea. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000.
Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one came in from James, who says, can I ask a question? You can, James. Talk is the only radio station I listen to, and all day, every day, people come on, phoning in, speaking things that make sense, that should be done, and give us the best chance of prospering. My question is, why don't people at the top see any of this? Surely they have thought it all themselves. Why aren't they acting upon it? What's holding them back? I don't understand. Do you know what? I absolutely 100% share the sort of incredulity behind that. Because you think, even if a certain politician doesn't think the common sense stuff, there's enough people around. They must go to meetings where somebody goes, I know a way to solve this. Somebody must pitch up at the meeting and say, yeah, no. Don't do that. Do this. See this? And you see the attraction, not just the attraction of Donald Trump, but the reason why Donald Trump scored such a convincing electoral win in November last year to take a second term as president was because he was doing the stuff that James is talking about there, not specifically, just the overarching, right, this is the way we've done business. It's clearly nuts. It's clearly stupid. The rules around this or the regulations around that or our approach to these issues are not shared by most average people. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do it this way. We're just going to employ some general common sense. And I was reminded, I saw the Home Secretary, and I can't what the point was, that she was asked something about... Oh, I tell you what it was. It was the couple that, I'm sure you guys talked about this last week quite a lot, the couple whose home was raided because of what they'd written on a WhatsApp group about the school. Maxie Allen. It must have come up, Adam, quite a lot last week, yeah, that story. Now, he was one of my producers back in the day. I forgot to tell you guys that, but it was an extraordinary story. And Yvette Cooper was asked about this, and she said, well, you know, as I understand it, they have been in dialogue with the school. I thought, no, just stand up and go, yeah, this is absolutely bonkers. Whatever happened here, the head teacher, whoever it is, the governors, whoever the specific people are that were responsible for this, manifesting in a raid on a couple's home, they should all walk the plank. They're all idiots, every single one of them. I'm not having it anymore. But you don't hear a politician say that. There's no... She would have been told before that interview, oh, they're going to ask you about this couple whose home was raided because they wrote some hurty words on a WhatsApp group. Here's what you should say, Home Secretary. Say, whilst I understand, I cannot comment on... No, stop it. Stop all that palaver. It's high-octane balderdash, right? Just come out with it. Say, no, this is clearly nonsense. I might not have the full detail, but I've got the gist of it. I don't want to see stuff like this in my country. That's not a democracy. Nobody should be raided because of stuff they wrote on a WhatsApp group. Seriously? And so we're literally threatening a war. 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Tony in Newcastle. On tariffs, Tony, what have you got for us?
Well, hi Ian. Well, the last caller, I'm afraid, stole most of me thunder.
It's always annoying when that happens, isn't it?
Oh, I was listening to him and I thought I was listening to myself, but without the
in a parallel universe.
I've lost 30 grand on my pension pot in the last sort of few weeks, and I could cry over it, or I could say, look, this is a long game. Mm-hmm. How can I unlock other stuff? Or isn't this the time for Mr. Starmer to unlock entrepreneurship, business, and say, right, if the global order has changed, then what we need to do now is start trying to see how we can shore up our country, which is what he's saying. So let's release the shackles. Yeah. And actually, while we're on it, why don't we start looking at our own resources instead of shipping in energy and gas and all that stuff from around the world? Start using our own that we've got under our feet, sell it, make a load of profit out of it. The rest of it helps us to get to net zero quicker.
Well, that's what the Chinese are doing, right? I mean, the Chinese are going, yep, OK, we are going to still build coal-powered power stations. We are still going to dig and drill, baby drill, but simultaneously we'll build the windmills like no one else in the planet Earth. We'll also stick the solar panels up. We'll run them in parallel. But in the meantime, we're going to make sure we can grow.
And that's it. And before I get orange paint strewn all over my house or on me cat, I'm not against net zero, but I just think we need to be sensible and play the long game.
It's not a religion, is it? I think that's the difference that many people are marking out. I don't know anyone who doesn't want a cleaner environment. Everybody wants a cleaner environment, and if you can achieve it and bills are cheaper, then what's not to like? I say this to Dale Vince all the time. Nothing wrong with that. Is there a way that you can run the other stuff in tandem with it until we get to that stage? That's all Trump's doing, Tony, right?
He's playing the long game.
Completely. They're putting up solar panels in the United States like it's going out of fashion. You know, they're not against all of that.
No, definitely not. And we have to stop trying to crash our economy. I'm going to be personal, but the Starmer reminds us of that. Remember that Dick Emery character? Dad, I think I got it wrong again. Just feels like that every day.
That was just beautiful, wasn't it? Well, you really tapped into a memory there, Tony. Dad, it was Roy Kinnear, wasn't it?
That's the first one, yeah.
Yeah, Roy Kinnear and Dick Emery. Love it. Tony, thank you. Tony in Newcastle. This from Jerry in Cardiff. Can you advise Mr Tolhurst, Alan Tolhurst, that we spoke to at the top of the show, that the Labour MPs, the ones who got banned from going into Israel, went with two charities? It was not any form of parliamentary or government visit. They both demanded in Commons 2 weeks ago that Starmer demands two major politicians in Israel government be in charge with genocide, says Jerry. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. We'll have more from you in a few moments' time. We're talking about the net zero stuff along with the, Starmer's new announcement on what he's going to do with hybrid cars, get another 5 years to flog a hybrid, brand new hybrid. The petrol and the diesel, it's still 2030. They'll have to stop making them. You will still be able to buy them second-hand and drive them, one would assume, forever, or sort of forever. But I think that's the point that Tony was just making there, is that you can aim for net zero, but you cannot do it if it means bankrupting your country along the way. That's the central allegation, right? So that's a very bad thing indeed to do that, and that's what Donald Trump is swerving. That's what China are swerving. They still have the coal-powered stations. They have all manner of other things going on that will be absolutely illegal in this country. Expansion of goodness knows what, air travel, you name it. All of that stuff is riding high. But they are also the biggest adopter of all of the net zero infrastructure, like the panels and the windmills. You get it? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. We'll go back to some more of your comment. Oh, by the way, Rich says, or is it Betty, says Scotch whisky is 15% cheaper than Irish whisky today. This is tariff related, I'm assuming, the point that Rich Betty is making. Thank you for that. Let's move to this story. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has called for the release of Lucy Connolly. This was the mum who was jailed for 31 months over a social media post following the Southport murders. Braverman slammed the sentence as excessive and accused the government of using Connolly as an example to silence dissent. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss also criticised the punishment, calling it completely unjustifiable. Let's speak with Alistair Donald, organiser at Living Freedom. Good afternoon to you, Alistair.
Hello, Ian.
31, there's quite a lot of terrible crimes that take place where not only do you not get 31 months, in fact, you don't get anything inside.
Yes, indeed. It's an outrage, I think. Alison Pearson's article in the last few days has been viewed hundreds of thousands, if not million times now. And I think it's a brilliant article because it sets out in so much detail exactly what happened to Lucy. And I think it's impossible to get to the end of that article and not feel devastated on a personal level for what's happened to her, but also quite disturbed by how the criminal justice system has handled the situation, both in terms of the very existence of laws that would allow that to take place, and also the way that people within the criminal justice system have treated her as well. So I think it's an outrage, terrible sentence, and to my mind, she should be released.
It is I mean, I think we all know by now she wrote something that was pretty awful. It wasn't nice, suggesting that a hotel with people in it is set fire to. It was not the best day she was having there. She wrote, mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels, full of the B word, for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government minder for their children. She concluded, I feel physically sick knowing what the Southport families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it. It was viewed 310,000 times before being deleted. Just on the back of that point, Alistair, I don't know anybody who's defending her tweet, right? Nobody is saying it was fine what she wrote. The question most people can't quite get their head around is, as awful as it is, 31, nearly 3 years essentially in jail is a long time for a disturbing tweet, right?
It's a very long time, yeah. I mean, it's a vile tweet, obviously, and one that she'll regret for the rest of her life, obviously. And regretted it very quickly, in fact, because it was deleted after 4 hours. She did the tweet, went out, took the dog for a walk, came back home and thought, I shouldn't have done that, and deleted it. So it was up for very little time. The context was the horrific events in Southport with the murder of those children. And she was someone with a personal history which had included the death at a very young age of one of her children. And as Alison Pearson explains very well, I think, that has lived with her and to some extent has caused her to feel very deeply about any situation that involves children. So obviously it was a ridiculous tweet. She took it down, but she, in the context of the Southport murders and the furore that followed that, where obviously we had the situation in towns throughout the country of riots breaking out and a lot of arrests, 1,500 arrests, many of them for crimes that people definitely should have been arrested because they involved burning down things, buildings and setting fire to things and all the rest of it. There's absolutely no doubt that many people who committed those crimes deserved to be locked up for what they'd done. But for a tweet, for offering an opinion, albeit a terrible opinion, that to me does not mean that you should be up in the dock for that. And as vile as it was, I think we should operate under the belief that free speech matters. And even in vile tweets, she should be allowed to express that opinion and hopefully taken up for it and told what people think, but not arrested and put through the courts and then receiving 31-month sentence.
Is this just, do you sense, I mean, I know that there's been a lot of accusations that, the word came from Downing Street, go hard on these people. That may have been the case, I have no idea. But we know that back in 2011, during the riots, there was a similar thing happened there. And I'm reminded of the case of Nicholas Robinson, who got 6 months in jail for stealing a £3.50 bottle of water at the time. So, does something happen in the judiciary, do you sense here, Alistair, where when there's a riot situation, which some would say is the greatest threat to any government, that you're going to have civil unrest, judges and magistrates, whoever, just simply leap into some kind of code red moment and start dispensing horrendous sentences? And I know it's fun to, call Keir Starmer two-tier Keir, but this kind of stuff has happened before.
Yeah, I don't go as far to say that it was pre-planned and they were waiting for an excuse to hype this stuff up so that they could make a point. But I think you're right in the way that you present it, that in situations of civil unrest and strife, then there can be a situation emerges where people are determined to make a point about the importance of civil order. And it does seem to me that that's what happened after these Southport murders. Yeah. The context was already existing concerns about the spread of misinformation. To some extent, it appears that that misinformation has influenced events, although I think it's very, very difficult to conclude that someone tweeting something has that very direct influence on events. I mean, people have their own decisions to make and they respond in their own ways. So I don't really buy that the tweet was harmful in that way, but it is the case that the government, from Keir Starmer downwards, were pretty determined to make a point on the dangers of going against their ideas about how we should communicate, if we can put it that way, on social media. And they very definitely set out to make a point, and that has undoubtedly fed through to the way that the police treated her initially, and even the Crown Prosecution Service misrepresented her in terms of what she said. They took information from an interview conducted in a police station and then gave a false impression that she condoned racism when there was nothing of the sort said. And all of these factors then contribute to a situation where it becomes much easier for those in a position of authority to say, well, you're going to face serious sentences because you have spread misinformation or spread racially motivated ideas on Twitter, as it was. So I think there was an outrageous response by those in authority and a determination, if I could put it that way, to make examples of people as a message to people down the line.
Indeed, and being unsavoury and being stupid or whatever, the last time I looked, stupidity is not a criminal offence. And I know this went a little further, and there was a suggestion that this was almost incitement because it fed into a wider narrative. But as you rightly say, the fact that it was taken down 4 hours later does compromise that allegation somewhat, and almost not just dilutes it, obliterates it really, because this clearly was somebody who, without being asked, thought, no, I've done something wrong here, I'm just angry about what has happened, I know it wasn't big or clever, and possibly some kind of, I don't know, fine or whatever, community, if there was a specific breach of the law that took it to that level. But I just can't get my head around how you can go to jail for 31 months for that.
Yes, I think that's right. I think it's worth looking at this idea of incitement as well, because it seems to me that the boundaries around what constitutes incitement have been drawn more and more broadly as time has gone across. I mean, if, for example, I'm in the studio with you, Ian, and I have a hammer, and someone egging me on to bash you over the head with that hammer, then there's a fairly direct incitement there, and I've got the weapon to be able to do it, and someone's encouraging me. So you can be fairly sure that something like that would be incitement. Yeah. But this is a much lesser standard, I think, in terms of the incitement charge. I mean, people have days and hours even, to look at that tweet, make an informed response to it. There's no, to my mind, direct incitement. I was looking over the weekend at tweets by Chris Packer, the environmental campaigner, who was tweeting himself, putting up posters on tube trains saying he wanted that the leaders of fossil fuel companies should be arrested. And that's a kind of, I found it fairly unsavory. I disagree with his environmentalism and all the rest of it. And some people were saying, well, that's an instance of incitement as well.
Yeah, you could argue that would put somebody's life potentially in danger.
Potentially it could, yeah. I mean, I would probably push back against that as well, but it is indicative of the fact that today, and you mentioned the two-tier approach to things we have just now, well, it does seem that some things are very definitely to be included and labelled as incitement, and a similar action on a different issue can be looked over and ignored. So I think this two-tier approach to the riot situation and to what is going on in terms of social media is very, very important, and something that we really have to get to grips with, because as we see, it's now feeding through into things like sentencing proposals, which I know have been stopped for now. But then as soon as you hear about the sentencing proposals, then no sooner have you heard that, then a whole load of other things start to come to light where that same two-tier approach is being deployed. So I think, yes, we've got to defend free speech, but we've got to be also very wary of the way that these two-tier approaches are being used to constrain the speech of some individuals, but not others.
100%. Alistair, great to have you on, sir. Thank you for your time. Alistair Donald, organiser at Living Freedom. That's an initiative on freedom and free speech that Alistair organises. I think it's very hard. Look, the tweet was horrible. And Look, I don't even think... I mean, the background of Lucy Connolly and what happened in her own personal circumstances and losing a child are horrific, and whether that was kind of in her mind that, you know, children are dead, I know what that feels like. The system is broken. You know, she jumped to conclusions. She wrote something ridiculous. She wrote something very, very unpleasant. She wrote something that could have been rather dangerous. Nobody would, for 1 second, support what she wrote. Okay, it was grim, it was dirty, it was, in all regards, a horrible thing for somebody to commit to social media. But there's a couple of points on that. One, the fact that she deleted it relatively quickly, I think you might think would be, without being asked to, by the way, you might think would have slightly gone in her favour in the courtroom. I mean, this woman might be horrific, by the way. I know nothing about Lucy Connolly. Based on that tweet, she's the last person I'd want to sit and break bread with. But what I value more, I have a greater opinion of justice than I have of Lucy Connolly and how it should work, and what is the fair and balanced and reasonably a modern, a reflective approach to things. What is the best value for the public, whether that's the physical value of what it costs to incarcerate somebody for just shy of 3 years, or whether it's the ethical cost in terms of how we deal, what sort of society we are. So I'm willing to believe Lucy Connolly is a horror show of a person. I'm willing to believe that's not the first sort of nefarious thought she might have had. I can imagine the kind of vocabulary she might utilise if she can very quickly write a tweet like that. I get all of that. So she might not be very nice. She might be an absolute thicko as well. Possibly, probably even, if you write that. However, more than that, I value, it's not about valuing freedom of speech, because, you know, freedom of speech is not the right to shout fire in a theatre. What she wrote was undeniably, demonstrably horrendous. But was it worth 3 years in jail? 3 years almost, 31 months in the slammer. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. We would use prison time for that. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be back with more comment from you. You might want to comment on that as well. Before we do, we're getting to the end of this now. It's time to find out how you could be in with a chance, one of the last chances to be in there with a chance of winning those Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
And, you know, we have got meant to be representatives of society in Parliament, and all sorts of accusations are being made at all sorts of people in this day and age. We are in a much more litigious age. We're in a much more cancel culture age, when it's commonplace now for people, and rightly, to speak up if they feel they've been treated or the law has not been followed. But it is also true, sadly, that some people take advantage of the situations.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 10 to 3. As we speak, the Prime Minister is speaking in the West Midlands. This is the announcement, a raft of new reforms to boost manufacturers in the wake of the Trump tariffs. If you're watching us on YouTube or elsewhere, he's flanked by a big old black Range Rover just behind him. Unless that's a green screen, of course, and he's just at number 10. I don't think so. He's in the West Midlands. These are the new initiatives to boost manufacturing set against what's been happening with the tariffs from America. We'll talk to Louise in just 1 second, but it's back. It's the voice of doom is back for the uninitiated. This is a mystery voice bit with a political flavour, so it could be a politician or somebody connected in some obvious way to politics. Could be past or present. Could be from yonks ago. Could be something slightly newer. So this one's gone on for 7 days. Nobody has got it so far. Here's the question. Who is this?
Political decisions were taken.
I think it's one of our toughest to date. But every time I say that, somebody often gets it on day one. This one has gone on for 7 days. Here it is again.
Political decisions were taken.
If we get a right answer, we'll reveal all in about 10 minutes' time, just after the headlines at 3 o'clock. If we don't, it rolls over to day 8 tomorrow. Here it is one more time.
Political decisions were taken.
Don't phone in. There ain't no prize, but you can message in if you fancy having a crack at that. 87222. 87222. Maybe we'll get an answer. Find out more in a few moments. Back to the tariffs, back to Donald Trump. Louise is in Kent. Hello, Louise.
Oh, hi there.
Hi.
Yes, I'm watching everything tank, naturally. Mine is savings in the stock market. That's the only pension. Well, it's not pension, it's savings, but I don't have a work pension, so
okay.
I've only got my state pension and that. So I'm watching it tank, but. I mean, in many ways, it's more my income that matters. And I spoke to my chap this morning, and we were both agreeing that actually there's no evidence at the moment, but things like dividends will go tank at the moment. It's far too early to tell. But the only thing is, I mean, all these people who, say, oh, Trump's the most fantastic businessman and everything else, I'm struggling a little bit with that. He apparently bankrupted his casinos 6 times, I think. The last time he was bailed out, well, his own son said he was rescued by Russian oligarchs and stuff, money-wise, etc. He didn't write The Art of the Deal. Somebody else did. So I'm struggling with that bit. I need to understand a bit about why he's this brilliant businessman.
Fair point.
But I do reflect as well, which makes me just laugh. Of course, Liz Truss, none of the stuff actually happened, but she tanked the markets over here, lost her job within days, and yet Trump has flipping well tanked the world.
It's a very good point.
And it makes me laugh. But the other, that's the one thing about that in many ways. But I'm afraid what I discussed with my chap this morning was what concerns me far more about what's happening across the world with the tariffs actually is Rachel Reeves and what she's done to our business on a day-to-day basis, because actually that affects me far more at the moment with my pennies going out of my pocket than anything that's happening on the markets at the moment, because providing my income's okay at the moment, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But anyway, I go to the hairdresser's tomorrow. I've already been told that each thing I have done will be gone up by £1 because of what Rachel Reeves is doing.
Yeah, well, that's the National Insurance response,
to me.
isn't it? Yeah.
Not this. Yes, okay, but it'll take time to filter through, and that could be 6 months. And the EV stuff. He's tinkering around the edges. What difference will luxury cars make to me? I can't charge an EV at home. I've got nowhere to do it. Nowhere. So what will I do?
You haven't got a man. Whereabouts in Kent are you, Louise?
I'm in a village outside Ashford.
All right, okay. I know that neck of the woods well. You must have a mansion. They've all got mansions outside.
No, I
of
haven't.
Ashford.
I'm an end of terrace.
Are you? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So I can't have an EV. There's nowhere to charge it. And why should I have to pay 15% VAT if I charge elsewhere, whereas the only two on my estate who can charge would pay 5%?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but all of that... So he's tinkering around the edges. And really, the first thing he could do is reverse the NICs. He could get rid of the EVs, and if he likes, put it to 2040 at least, to give us all some... Because I think it'll all have collapsed by then anyway.
Well, it might, as you say, it might recalibrate. And, what goes up must come down, and all of those usual laws of physics that apply in areas such as economics and international trading and tariffs and taxes and import duty. Eventually stuff pans out. Nobody quite, as yet, knows which route the panning out will take. But pan out it will at some point. This is not, an irredeemable reality that you're stuck in this place forevermore. I wish you luck, Louise. It's a great call. Thank you very much indeed. Interesting analysis as well about what makes Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump a great businessman? Is he lucky? He's a raconteur. When I said he's a bit of an Arthur Daly on a grand scale, I didn't say that as a swipe or an insult. I mean, that's kind of the way he rumbles. He's got a streetwise brain rather than a sort of Adam Smith economist brain in that conventional sense. 0344 499 1000. More to come in the next section. And of course, the voice of doom. Will we get an answer? Whose voice is this?
Political decisions were taken.
If you think you know, don't phone in, but you can message 87222. We'll tell you on the other side of the news at 3.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock, welcome back to the home of common sense. Coming up, UK and EU markets are plunging. The FTSE, that was a right old drop this morning, 6% shortly after opening. The fall continues, of course, from Donald Trump's global tariffs. But here's the thing. Is there something more going on here? Is Trump playing a skillful game? 3D chess, as some have called it. Or is it just very dangerous? He ain't got a clue what he's up to. We'll have more detail, more response from you on that. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is pledging bold changes, including relaxing electric vehicle rules to ease tariff pressures, but the 2030 ban on petrol and diesel cars remains in place. He's currently in the West Midlands addressing workers there at a factory as Range Rover models glide past him at slow rate in the background for a bit of added theatre. And a senior NHS nurse who addressed a transgender paedophile as Mr. has now been suspended after speaking out, despite being called the N-word 3 times and attacked by the patient. This is the upside-down world we've been referring to, kids. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This one comes in from Caroline. What I would like to know is whether the Reform Party would reverse the petrol diesel car 2030 ban if they won the 2029 election. I have an awful feeling they won't. Yeah, and the problem they would have, potentially, is that motor manufacturers have spent years gearing up to this. So all of their business models are now based on not making those models by 2030. So even if a party did come in with good intentions, I think they would find it almost impossible to reverse it without causing companies to spend Lord knows how many hundreds of millions of pounds on reversing everything they've spent the last 8-9 years working towards. Ruth in Canterbury, regarding America's trade tariffs, Donald Trump is responding to global tariffs that have been imposed on American exports for years. For too long, the global markets have been arguably sponging off America and benefiting from zero trade tariffs, while America has been paying tariffs to export to every other country. Well, America don't pay the tariff, of course. The other country would pay the tariff. They would pay the import. But I think I take the point that Ruth is making. Trump has addressed this trade imbalance, and Britain has got off lightly with a 10% trade tariff, which is exactly the same as the tariff that we already impose on America and have done for years. Thank you to Ruth in Canterbury for that. Let's get to this story then. Keir Starmer promising bold changes to support car makers facing the tariff problem. This is reference electric cars. Keir Starmer plans to reduce non-compliance fines from 15,000 to 12,000, extend hybrid car sales until 2035, but insists that that 2030 ban on petrol and diesel will remain. He's been speaking at the Jaguar Land Rover plant in the West Midlands earlier. Let's have a listen to some of what he said. In fact, we can have a listen in a few moments. This, of course, is reference President Donald Trump imposing a 25% tariff on all foreign cars sold in the United States. We're going to speak to Steve Berry in just a couple of moments, former Top Gear presenter, journalist and all-round good bloke. In fact, let's speak to Steve now, just while we line up those words of Keir Starmer. Steve, good afternoon to you.
Ian, thank you so much, mate.
It's a pleasure, and it's always great to have you on.
Not what you said about me, not that.
No, not that.
But the fact that, unlike so many media organisations, Talk doesn't just think that major car makers can knock off on a Friday afternoon, send the lads home, and then start producing a completely different... I know that these sweethearts have come straight out of Oxbridge or the LSE and gone straight to the BBC or whatever, and they have no idea how things would work in, say, manufactured goods. But thank you for emphasising that the car companies can't just change their plans at the whim of governments who make these lofty pronouncements from on high. And the car companies... Ian, I've owned a car made in the planned economy, a Lada. You put your name down on a list, 10 years later, you got a phone call. Tavares, your car is ready. And you got whatever colour and whatever configuration you wanted. That is the supply of cars in a planned economy.
Yeah.
Communism, right? A few years ago, the government told us, oh, you're not going to be able to buy petrol and diesel cars anymore. Why? Well, because we say so, because it's bad for the planet. And I knew this wouldn't happen. But I also knew that these changes would come gradually. Every few months or so, there's a new announcement. Oh, we've moved this forward. Oh, we've pushed that back.
Yep.
Oh, we've changed the rules. I knew this would happen.
And here we are with another rule change, which may not, based on what we were just saying, Steve, I mean, it's all very well saying, look, we're going to give a little bit of a stay of execution to hybrid cars, but so many of those companies would have already worked out a plan that they're not going to build any more hybrid cars. So will it even make a difference?
Yeah. Yeah. It takes years and years for a new car to come to the market.
Yeah.
I do a lot of reading around this. I'm a bit of a sado. Between 6 and 7 years, it takes a lot longer to establish a car factory and start building cars in that factory. I'm in Manchester, mate. This is the home of globalisation, where Henry Ford invented that idea. Yeah. He came to Manchester and he built his cars on a production line here in Manchester because he knew that it'd be a lot easier to sell them if British people thought his product was British. Now, the profits all went back to Detroit, Michigan, but we seem to forget that as the years went by and started to look at Ford as a British company. Same with Vauxhall. Vauxhall was sold to General Motors in 1929, and yet British people still today would have told you that a Vauxhall was a British car. So this isn't great for the cars that are made here in the UK. And I know that lots and lots of people I know, have jobs in that industry. But how many of those cars are British, Ian? How many of those car companies are British? I'll tell you, mate, none of them.
Yeah.
Not one.
But of course, we are involved in the manufacturing in a fairly hefty way, Steve. So I suppose what the industry will want and what consumers want, is to see growth and expansion, and that's really the problem here, isn't it? Because someone, not to sort of throw in an obvious pun, someone's put the handbrake on.
I don't think we're going to see that, mate. I think that's unrealistic. My dad worked in the paper business all his life. He's 86 now. They used to bring the trees from Canada to Bury, Lancashire, where there were 20 paper mills, East Lancs, Wigan's Tea, Transparent, Olives, Wilds, Bibby and Barron. One day they woke up and thought, why are we bringing the trees halfway around the world to turn them into paper? Cars are going to be made in volume somewhere else, not here. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's just the way the world's gone. But here's our consolation. We've still got, it's not much of a consolation, but we've got it. We've still got Rolls-Royce, Bentley, McLaren, Lotus, Morgan, Caterham. We've still got those high-end, high-value, low-volume car makers. And hidden amongst all the numbers on these changes, they've allowed, from 2030, it was going to be no more petrol or diesel vehicles. Yeah. They're allowing the low-volume car makers in the UK, like McLaren, like Lotus, to carry on making petrol engine cars. Because I think there's going to be a point. Do you know cars in the UK, 2019, we made just over 1.5 million. Last year, 800,000. That's only going one way, isn't it? It doesn't do me any favours. I don't like that, but that's the way it's going. However, exports of our luxury high-end cars are booming all over the world, because guess what? People are getting rich in places like China, and just like everybody else in the last 100 years that's been rich, they want a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, mate. And that's always going to be made in Britain.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that point. There is consolation. There is a silver lining. Steve, as ever, thank you. Great to have you on. Steve Berry, former Top Gear presenter, referenced that interesting change that Keir Starmer has been talking about. He's currently in the West Midlands at Jaguar Land Rover at the plant there. Let's have a little listen to some of what he said just moments ago.
This is British brilliance in the flesh. You are making cars here, but you're also representing our country with each car as it departs. That's the pride that always goes with making things, and I've said it many times before, but I will say it again. My dad worked in a factory. He was an engineer. He made things with his hands. And he taught me as I was growing up that you should value the things that we make, and that is what's brilliant about manufacturing. And manufacturing shapes the identity of a place, this place, and of a community, and of a country. And that's how it gets in your blood, which is why electric vehicles are so important. Yes, of course, it's about the climate, and you won't hear me undermining the urgency of that cause, but it's also about taking the pride, the heritage, the identity of places like this.
There it is. The son of a toolmaker strikes again. Keir Starmer there at the West Midlands plant, the Jaguar Land Rover plant, talking up the car industry, although Steve Berry, the journalist we spoke to a moment ago, said that's, maybe slightly too optimistic in terms of the direction of travel. Let's speak with James Bowley, spokesperson for the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. James, good afternoon to you, sir. That you may have heard what Steve Berry was saying there, that, it's clearly, I think we can all agree, it's a tricky time if you make cars for a living, etc. Give us your overview from the Society's perspective of how you see the current state of play, bearing in mind these new tariffs, these 25% tariffs that have just come in the United States.
Absolutely. So this is an industry that's in a global transition. In addition to the new tariffs we're seeing with the United States, we are, of course, making that move to zero-emission vehicles as well at pace. That's happening very fast within the UK at the moment. The challenge at the moment, though, in the UK is that market demand isn't quite the level of ambition. So where we've seen today those changes coming through for the Z mandate, that's a sign that government's really listening and really understands the importance of the automotive industry for this country, both for the market, but also manufacturing. As has been rightly pointed out by both the Prime Minister and your previous guest, the UK is a real manufacturing superpower when it comes to the automotive sector. We have probably the most diverse range of vehicles in the world made within the UK, everything from mass market to premium and specialist sports cars, taxis, buses, coaches, trucks, vans. They're all made here in the UK and all exported around the world with iconic brands that are really well respected.
Indeed, long may that continue. Steve, our previous guest, was saying that, the direction of travel isn't quite so rosy. Do you share that analysis?
So there are challenges on the road ahead. It's all about making sure that we remain internationally competitive. So some of the steps that are being taken today help boost some of that competitiveness. It's sending a really clear signal, firstly, that the UK really values car manufacturing. We also now have clarity of the timeline for the market within the UK. We now understand when we'll see the end of sale for pure petrol and diesel cars. We also now understand that space for hybrids as well between 2030 and 2035, which again is super important because those vehicles have much lower emissions than conventional petrol and diesel cars. So every one of those vehicles that we're putting on the road and replacing an older ICE vehicle, an older petrol or diesel vehicle, that's all to the good for helping decarbonise road transport.
But of course, there will be manufacturers, and we touched on this with Steve, our last guest, that will have already set out their business plan not to make any new hybrids. Everything is lined up, ready to go. They haven't, invested or wouldn't need to invest the time, if nothing else, into thinking about it, only to be told today, oh, you've got another 5 years. That could be a problem.
So manufacturers have been making these long-term investments. There's always been that understanding that from 2030, that's when we're seeing the dial back for petrol and diesel cars. So that's always been well understood. The industry's gone all in for this transition. So today's announcement, it's certainly a benefit and it certainly helps the market. But ultimately, we all know the direction of travel and it's something that the industry's committed to.
James, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. James Bowley is from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. I just thought Steve Berry's point on the numbers over the years, the decline in numbers of cars we make, is quite telling. It's not necessarily fatal. I like certainly the optimism of James from the Society of Motor Manufacturers. I know that's his gig. Some would say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But there's a lot of skill there. There's a lot of demand, and let's hope we can somehow bottle it and continue it for many, many years to come. This one from Glenn in Colchester. Why don't the government practice what it preaches? 820,000 vehicles in the mobility scheme, of which 70,000 are electric. The scheme accounts for 1 in 5 new cars sold in the UK. Surely there should be demanding all vehicles should be electric, says Glenn. Thank you for that. Anna in Surrey. Trump is not responsible for the world, just the USA. I doubled my investment yesterday. There are always winners and losers. Currently, the biggest threat to the UK is our own government, who are desperate enough to tell us to get a grab bag because the Russians are coming. Quick, run. Where to, Keith? Bognor? Skegness? Well, Skegness, he'd end up in Richard Tice's constituency, wouldn't he? That'd be interesting. Another one here, this one from Bill. We need to manufacture a national car. It's no good simply being dependent on foreign producers to do it for us. After all, they take the profits back home with them, go to Italy, and they drive Fiats. In France, they drive Citroens and Peugeots. Well, I mean, the smart money says that's the whole... I know this is rather crudely put, but part of the thinking of Donald Trump is that you'll be buying American-owned and built vehicles if you're an American, because all the other stuff will be a little more expensive than it was before. And the way to address that is buy American, make America great again. And if it literally followed that twice the amount of Americans that were thinking of a new car went for an American model as distinct to a foreign model, then Trump's point would be borne out. As I said at the beginning, I know it's America and it has implications for the rest of the world. But as a previous communicator said, Donald Trump is the president of America. It's his job to look out for America and Americans. And if tariffs have that effect, that people start going, hey, yeah, I'm going to buy American, then you create more jobs. Then you begin to innovate new products. That becomes the thing. Wow, life's good again. Taxes can come down because money is being made all over the place with this new injection of enthusiasm for American products. Because all the other stuff is just too expensive anyway. So let's go American. Tony in Scunthorpe says, Starmer talks about manufacturing, but what about Scunthorpe Steel? It's a good point. It's where I was born, Tony, as you may or may not know. Scunthorpe Steel has been absolutely trounced, and I'm not really hearing any important political voices saying anything other than, isn't it sad? Maybe do something about it. Caroline says, you rich presenters get on my nerves. It is the rich people who will be driving on the roads, while poor people and lower income people will be left with really old second-hand petrol diesel cars. You rich people don't give a damn if lower wage people cannot afford an awful EV, says Caroline. I assume that's a joke. I don't know. I haven't got an EV, by the way. One of the reasons I wouldn't have an EV at the moment is because they're too darn expensive. They haven't kind of found their way yet. It feels like, I always make this an analogy. Remember when Bluetooth first came out and it just didn't work? It still doesn't work fully as it should do. When Bluetooth technology came out, people would be trying it, going, well, I'm meant to be able to pick up this thing called Bluetooth. It's just not working properly. And I think there is a real sense that the electric car market is a bit like that, that it's not, you know, it's not quite there. There's a lot we don't know. The confidence of walking into a garage forecourt and looking at cars when you can work out, oh, it's done 60,000 miles on the clock. It's a Volvo XC90. Yeah, I know what that means. It's a big car, but it's a good car. It's a few years old, which is different to, 10 years back when 60,000 miles was different to 60,000 miles. So you can make it all work, and you can do the calculation. With an electric car, somebody says it's done 60,000 miles. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Is that bad? Good? Is that a risk? Is that something you shouldn't go near? I've got no idea whatsoever. The last car I bought had done 90,000 miles on the clock. It was a Volvo, a second-hand Volvo. That's what rich presenters buy, Caroline. Second-hand cars that have done 90,000 on the clock. And you should see the second vehicle. In fact, it's worth nothing, the little Toyota. But yes, you're right. I mean, there is clearly an issue around our confidence in that industry. And I have no sense that that's going to get better any time in the next couple of years. 0344 499 1000.
This is in the Daily Mail. This is in the Daily Mail. Violent Albanian gangland mobsters are hiding in vans, using Rolexes and hiring fake tourists to send dirty money back home to use in a life of luxury. Wait for this. There are 1,100 Albanians in jail, including murderers, rapists and Fid Balkan mafia kingpins. I thought we had a returns agreement, by the way, with Albania. The NCA, the National Crime Agency, has for years warned about the significant threat posed by Albanian gangs because they are infamous for their professionalism and discipline and also savage tactics.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Glenn, who says, oh no, I think I've read that one from Glenn about mobility vehicles and the fact that we buy foreign. Good point. Sean says, good afternoon. Almost sane-minded people want is consistency, whether it's in sport or law. It almost takes second place to the law being very harsh. This was, I think, reference to the sentencing of Lucy Connolly, where there is a petition. Suella Braverman, Suella Braverman is certainly has been vocal about it, and Alison Pearson wrote an incredible piece in the Telegraph, really outlining a bit more detail of Lucy Connolly's case. Nobody on the planet would in any way endorse what Lucy Connolly had written. It was pretty grim stuff. I would take it, based on that, that it wasn't written by somebody of sane mind, and that's not a swipe, but perhaps an indicator of where her head was at the time. It's also not a defence, but I don't think, normal thinking people would write something as horrific as that. But do you get nearly 3 years in jail for that? That's the issue at the centre of all of this. Will it make any difference? Will she appeal? Can she appeal? 0344 499 1000. Just before we carry on, we didn't do the payoff, as it's called in the trade, for the voice of doom. Before the news, we played you the current mystery voice. Here it is.
Political decisions were taken.
Have we got a winner? These are some of the answers we got. Mark Francois. No. Nick Clegg, it is not. William Hamling, no. Matt Hancock, no. Nick Dubois, no. Jacob Rees-Mogg, it isn't. Ian Duncan Smith, it isn't. And guess what? We haven't got a winner, which means it's back tomorrow, day 8 of The Voice of Doom. Have another listen.
Political decisions were taken.
Who is that? If you think you know, tomorrow, around about 2:45, it returns. 26 minutes after 3, back to your calls. Chris in Epsom on EVs. Chris, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. Hope you had a nice holiday.
Not bad at all, thank you.
Yeah, your gap was filled in nicely.
It was. David Bull does sterling work. What a solid person to have in the seat.
Yes, he is. EVs. That James you had just had on from the SMMT.
Yeah.
He's obviously a Labour voting twit, right? Because he's not mentioned the problems with EVs. The government haven't invested in charging points. All right, people won't buy the stuff because not only are they very, very expensive, but there isn't the charging points for them. Yeah. Now, we will keep our luxury car section, and I've got 10 years, I had 10 years in the motor trade. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Lotus, that type of thing, they will go on producing vehicles because the people that buy them, they can afford to pay the extra costs of not just tariffs, because that's not what's killing us. What's going to kill it is that we pay 9 times the commercial price of what they do in America for electricity. All right, 9 times. We've got the highest prices in Europe. We've got the gas line from Norway to Germany under threat at the moment. And also, we've got no gas storage, so we can't store gas. The wind farms and the Ed Miliband nutcase, right? Net zero needs to be dumped. We're not doing anything for the UK. We're not doing anything for the planet. We produce slightly less than 1% of the human emission created carbon, all right? And it's an absolute nonsense. There's many, many scientists, including one of the co-founders of the International Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, who started all this. One of the co-founders of that has now rode back and said, carbon's not heating the planet. The planet's just in a normal... It's being caused by glacial shift, which has happened for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. They've got ice cores that go back 300,000 years that show that the carbon content in the atmosphere, where it was 240 parts per million before the Industrial Revolution, and it's now 400 parts per million, 300,000 years ago, it was 3,000 parts per million. Did you know that farmers buy carbon-generating machines to put in their greenhouses because plants grow best at between 12 and 1,500 parts per million? Now we've come up to 400 parts per million. You've got sections of desert in Saudi Arabia and the Sahara that are called re-greening. Yep. Because the carbon content is actually, because they get rain now as well, the carbon content is actually showing or giving the plants the breath of life to grow. This is, you know, even if we wanted to, even if we said yes, it's all human carbon emissions, which it ain't, all we've done is shifted our production, which caused that carbon that everybody's so worried about. We've shifted it to other countries like China, and then we're bringing the products back in. We've just offshored all our carbon emissions. We're creating more carbon now than we were 10 years ago.
Chris, let me just ask you a question on that, and I genuinely don't know the answer. If there was a climate scientist sitting here now, I would imagine he would have an answer to everything you've just said. Now, let's say he's not sponsored by anybody. He's not, like, you know, in the pocket of some manufacturer of net zero produce or whatever. He would say, yep, what you've said is true, but you're forgetting one really important fact, and then he would throw the fact at you. I only say that because I can't believe even the stupid ones, put those aside, I can't believe every scientist who is advocating this problem is making it up.
No, a lot of them bought into it because they were told that the IPCC was 1,500 of the world's leading scientists say this is true. But actually, they weren't all scientists. A lot of them were just commentators. Everybody believed they were all scientists, and they weren't. And as I said, the co-founder of the IPCC has now rode back on it. You can see him, find him on Google. It's quite simple. If you go on Google and look, all right, there's many scientists now that are prepared to put their head above the parapet because of what's going on in the Western world. If you look east, you know, Russia, India, China, all the other countries, nobody's doing this because their scientists have told their government it doesn't matter one iota. Do you think, for 1 minute, the Chinese are so stupid that they would build 2 coal-fired power stations a week if they knew it was going to destroy the planet? Of course they wouldn't.
Well, that's the bit that has never made sense to me. You're absolutely spot on. Bearing in mind, 4x4 cars are the things that apparently kill us, and yet you can go to the shops tomorrow and buy as many of them as you like. You know, when a virus started snaking its way around the planet, they closed the world because it could mean death, and yet the very things that apparently are going to kill us are still for sale at the moment. Curious times. Chris, I love it. I love your research as well. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. We are going to talk about the case as well of the nurse who's been suspended after calling a transgender paedophile Mr. This is an NHS story of woe, I can tell you that much. Details coming next. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 4, Jeremy Carl's here at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Looking forward to that. And this story, the NHS nurse, and we talked about Jennifer Mell a little while ago, about a week ago. An NHS nurse has been suspended now after calling a transgender paedophile patient Mr. and speaking out about the case. The 40-year-old nurse was previously disciplined after refusing to refer to the convicted sex offender as a woman, despite being racially abused and attacked by the patient, apparently called the N-word several times. She was suspended following a brief meeting with a manager and escorted out of St Helier Hospital in tears. Let's speak with Tim Dieppe, Head of Public Policy at Christian Concern. Afternoon to you, Tim.
Afternoon, Ian.
If we were having this conversation 20 years ago, it would just be the plot from some bizarre sitcom, wouldn't it? Where we'd be going, oh, yeah, you see what happened to this person. They called a man, and this man also happened to be a convicted paedophile as well. And then the nurse got sacked for doing it. And then we'd go to work the next day and say, oh, you see that latest episode? It was hilarious. Guess what happened? And yet here we are with reality turned upside down. Night is day, black is white, all the rest of it, in this curious, bizarre situation where this poor nurse has now lost her job.
Well, she's been suspended rather than actually losing her job just now, but she's under, that kind of level of strict discipline. She was escorted out of the premises and, immediately in tears just the other day. Because of this. And, what she was doing, she was doing her duties as a nurse. She looked up on the medical records said the patient is male. She needed to speak to a doctor, picked up the phone to speak to the doctor, said to the doctor, Mr. So-and-so, whatever else she said about him. But the patient, unfortunately, overheard the conversation and went berserk and sort of, you can't call me Mr., I'm Mrs., whatever, and proceeded to racially abuse her, call her the N-word, and lunge at her and all of this kind of stuff. And poor Jennifer was kind of, distressed and upset and shocked at the abuse she was receiving, and explained that she'd been talking to the doctor. And that in conscience, she's not going to refer to him as her, particularly in a medical situation where you're talking about, medical procedures and stuff. So
yes, where I understand the procedure in question was relevant to the gender of the patient.
Well, exactly. Yes, it's about a catheter and things like that. Yeah. So it's absurd and crazy, really, that the NHS are going to this lengths of now suspending her, disciplining her even more for this. You'd have thought they might sort of backtrack and say, oh yeah, really sorry, that shouldn't have happened. Actually, you're quite right, and you're within your rights to call him he, particularly when you talk about biological issues and so on in the medical context, talking to a doctor. You weren't actually talking to him in the first place. She was talking to a doctor in the first place as well. And you'd have thought the NHS would say, yes, fine, that's fine to do that. But instead, they double down and say, no, this is terrible. You misgendered him. Even though he's a convicted paedophile and out of sympathies for his victims, apart from anything else, you'd have thought you'd have called him. And his medical record said he's male and so on. So it is an absurd, crazy thing. She's not broken any laws. I really hope the NHS is embarrassed by this and ends up changing its policy as a result. She's going to pursue a legal case now for discrimination against her because of her Christian beliefs and arguably because of her race as well, because I understand that somebody who's not black proceeded to call this guy he later on in the day and received no discipline, and yet she was disciplined.
I mean, the idea that her... And we often do phone-ins, Tim, on the challenges facing emergency and medical staff getting attacked in hospitals and in medical settings. It's not unusual for that to be on the news agenda. You might think that the hospital concern would be, their first point of concern would be for her welfare. Is she okay? She's been racially abused. There's an allegation she was physically abused as well. That would be number one. But apparently gender ideology overtook that, and they were more up in arms, it seems, about the Mr. than they were about the fact this woman was referred to with the N-word on several occasions.
Yes, and was left, distressed and sleepless nights and was told he'd further mentioned her later in the night to another colleague and said, you know, threatening things about her and so on. And nobody at NHS reached out to help her or give her support or give her any sympathy. The opposite was the case. You know, she needed to be disciplined for not treating him with due respect, whatever it might be. You know, well, you know, it is absurd. You know, how can the NHS side with a convicted paedophile who racially abuses someone who insists that you lie about who he is, rather than with a, you know, senior nurse with good experience and good standing, never been disciplined before, never gone so before, and speaking the medically correct terminology about who he is? This is the absurd situation we've got to here, and it is crazy, and it really needs to change. Yeah. And I hope this catalyses some change as we get to the legal case, where I hope we win.
You'd hope so. And you know, the last thing that the NHS can afford is to lose good nurses at the moment either, which is another issue around this. On the wider point, Tim, that we, you know, again, this subject of gender and the gender spectrum. I've done this job for over 20 years. This never came up as a subject until about half an hour ago, it seems, and now the world has gone absolutely mad. Where it came from, I'll let somebody make the documentary on that at some point, I'm sure, but it just seems to have got completely out of control. But just educate me slightly here, or advise me if you can, and our listeners and viewers. I don't want to be nasty to anybody. I don't want to upset anybody. If somebody comes along and says, look, I genuinely feel like I'm a woman in a man's body and I want to live my life in this kind of way. Now, it isn't for me to moderate or change my language to appease someone's issue, whether that issue is psychological, medical, physical, whatever it happens to be. But I simultaneously don't want to be unkind to them either. What do you think is the Christian way to deal with this labyrinthine subject that's exploded in recent years without recognising and understanding reality, which is what I'm really interested in, but simultaneously not wanting... I don't want anybody to go home from work in tears or be hurt. What is the right approach? How would you as a Christian advise on that?
Well, I've spoken to ex-transgender people who say, actually, the people who went along with my lie, with my sort of con, with my delusion, actually, about who I was, are the people who didn't help me. The people who ended up helping me in the end were those who lovingly, caringly, compassionately, with empathy, said, no, actually, you're not a man, you are a woman, or whichever way around it might be. And lovingly said, no, we're not going to support you in this. You know, we love you, we appreciate you, we're going to stay friends with you, we're going to stand with you in this, but this is not actually who you are. And I think that's the kindest, compassionate thing to do, is say, no, I'm not going to go along with your delusion about who you are. I'm going to lovingly, kindly support you, but say, no, this much I'm not going to agree with, and you're not going to compel me to go along with that delusion. As you would, for example, with someone with anorexia, who says, oh, I'm so fat, you know, and I really need to stop eating. No, I'm not going to go along with that delusion. It's not going to help you. I don't want you to believe lies about yourself. And someone who's saying, no, I'm born in the wrong body. No, I'm not going to actually affirm that delusion about you. That's not good for you. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help you long term. You need to resolve the truth about yourself, which is, you know, you are identified with the body that you're in. And resolve it that way and live that way, and that's better for you. And so I think that's the kind, loving, compassionate, truthful thing to do. The Bible talks about speaking the truth in love, and that's what I would want to do with people who I meet and interact with, in a kind way, in a compassionate way, in a way hopefully they can see my heart, that's not coming with hatred, it's not coming with any attempt to discriminate or harm them in any way. It's coming motivated by love. I'm not going to go along with the disillusion. That's the point.
Very thorough response, Tim. Thank you, sir. Great to have you on. Tim Dieppe is the head of public policy at Christian Concern. Reference the Jennifer Mell story, the nurse who was disciplined, initially told off that, you know, she called a transgender paedophile Mr. And she's now lost her job. I think the suspension. She's suspended, so she's not yet fired, and let's hope it doesn't come to that. I think this is in part because she gave an interview about the experience, which I believe is against the guidelines of the medical world, etc. Either way, we are left with the jaw-dropping, breathtaking reality. This nurse, who, when speaking to a doctor, by the way, another medic, used the term Mr., the paedophile got very upset and said, I'm not a Mr., I'm a Miss. And you think, really? you've got a lot of things going on here. You're a paedophile for a start, so I think that's, you know, something that most people might keep in mind, although I don't believe for one second that the nurse was considering any of that at the time. You are also now transgender. I don't know at what point this happened, and whilst that's not illegal, it may well be that your medical notes said differently, so the nurse simply used the notes. You were having a catheter fitted, so I'm pretty sure you've got to know you've got to get your gender correct on that one. That would be reasonable. It should be a fuss about nothing in one respect. It should have come to nothing. The transgender paedophile could have complained, and they would have said, well, OK, you can complain, but we're not going to take action against a nurse who just correctly referred to your real gender while having a medical procedure. I don't think anybody would be arguing too much against that, would they? But that's the kind of bonkers world we found ourselves in. Brexit Duck says all climate scientists are in the pay of the climate change gravy train. If they dare question the narrative, they lose their funding. It's that simple. Well, I kind of once thought it was that simple. And then when I, interviewed scientists over the years, and most of them say, well, I don't get funding from anybody. I'm not in that kind of world of science. If you're in research and that's what you do, then yeah, you may well get funding. But that wouldn't explain the scientists that don't get funding that have that view. And the idea that all of them, or 99% of them, would sort of club together and go, oh my God, we must lie about everything we've learned and just pretend and not let anybody else in on the secret. That's sort of man didn't land on the moon territory, isn't it? People would know, that would get out somewhere. Somebody somewhere who used to be a scientist would say, yeah, when you get a former Scientologist who says, I'm going to spill the beans on what goes on. If something does go on, there are those allegations. You'd have a bit of that somewhere, wouldn't you? You'd have at least one person come forward and go, yeah, this is what they taught us to say. So I don't think it's that either, notwithstanding the fact that I do agree that there are groups of scientists who have different views. It's what proportion have those different views. And it's a bit like the COVID thing. I still get loads of people send in, why are you not talking about this? Here's a doctor exposing the truth of COVID. It was never a thing. It never really existed. And then you think, well, it clearly did exist. We know we as a world, had a massive overreaction to it. But what about all the doctors who have the majority of doctors who have a different view to it? So you can't, if you want to debate that stuff, you can't let that go and go, okay, like I found 20 doctors who very passionately will take on the pharmaceutical companies, they'll take on governments, they'll take on anyone and tell you that the whole Brexit thing was the whole COVID thing was a lie. And everything about it was made up and invented to scare people, to make money for big pharmaceuticals, all of that. So I've got this group of people. In fact, I've got 500 of them. I've got 5,000 doctors around the world who believe this. I'm not sure it is 5,000. And somebody would go, yeah, but I've got 5 million who don't believe that. So what do we do with that figure? By the way, I don't know the answer to this. But you'd be failing not to acknowledge that disproportionality when talking about this stuff. Maybe it's meant to be this confusing, so we just keep on talking about it and we go around in a sort of bizarre cul-de-sac, an impenetrable wall, where we never get to the answer. Maybe that's the gig of life. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. This is Talk.
I tweeted out that she should be freed. She is clearly a victim of two-tier justice.
She spoke of mass deportations and setting fire to
what she
asylum
tweeted was wrong. It was vile. But she realised that in the heat of the moment, she took it down 3 or 4 hours later and apologised. She is the victim of two-tier justice, and I just think it's wrong. And I've tweeted out, of course, she should not be in prison for this. You know, whether it's community service or whatever. Learn your lesson, but frankly, it's appalling.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Back to you on the phones. David is in Manchester. What do you got for us, David? Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Fantastic show again, as usual.
Thank you. That's very kind, Dave. Cheers.
You brought something up about the Scunthorpe Steelworks.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know. It's called British Steel. Yeah. It's owned by the Chinese.
It is indeed.
And now they're refusing to send ore, etc., into the factory. There's over 3,000 people going to lose their jobs. But this is a situation, as I say, as an ex-serviceman, we have no other steelworks produce high-quality steel, like tanks, guns, armour plating, and the same defence will rise by 2025 or however in the future. And all our industry is owned by somebody else. And nobody talks about it.
Is it too late to get some of it back? Somebody said earlier we should invent a new car, like the Chinese do. Why don't we invent one?
You can't defend the country with a car. You need a tank.
Well, you can't defend it, but no, of course you can't. But in terms of doing stuff ourselves.
Well, all our industry has gone. We used to have 5 ordnance factories making tanks, planes, etc.
Yep.
All gone. And we buy stuff from Ireland. If you buy anti-tank missile, now it takes 1 year for one from Ireland. We've got nothing here. All the industry has got. And now our last steelwork, which is owned by China, even though we call it British Steel, is not British. And if we lose that, then we have no industry left.
It's a grim thought, isn't it? I mean, part of the thinking, and I think actually, I don't say this to just defend Margaret Thatcher, but this whole process of industry going elsewhere predates Thatcher, actually. Back to the 50s, you can see this stuff starting to happen.
Well,
what we didn't do is rescue it.
I was actually in the Cold War when it went on. We have lots of ships. We have British Army of the Rhine, 120,000 men there with 3 different tank battalions.
Yeah.
We've got nothing left. We've got less than 100 tanks left here.
Well, that's not good. Maybe they will be out there in mini metros fighting wars in the future, Dave.
Okay, the drones are coming, etc.
Yeah.
But we have no industry to produce any armour with the high-quality steel for the ships, the tanks, etc., and the guns. You need high-quality steel for 105 pack hour to...
we haven't got the steel.
That's the Chinese to make them.
Well, they will do. I'm sure they will. Everything will be made in one place and probably sold by Amazon. There's a conspiracy. David, thank you. Great call. David in Manchester on tariffs and the like. This from Stephen in Lincolnshire. We in the UK are living beyond our means. This is evidenced by the budget deficit and balance of payment deficit. Politicians are too cowardly to point this out, so millions of us are in denial or ignorance. Socialists believe in a redistribution of wealth rather than creating wealth. Sooner or later, reality will hit us hard. It hasn't even begun, says Stephen in Lincolnshire. That's quite a dark, pessimistic thought, but Stephen might be bang on with that. Is there a point? We're a service country. That was the way it was kind of redesigned, if you like, wasn't it? Recalibrated. We do service stuff. We don't send blokes down holes in the ground chiselling out coal anymore. We don't do horrible stuff like that. We're a service industry. Our finance industry is amazing, although I'm sure with AI and, you know, the digital world, that becomes, you know, less impressive by the year. I don't know, but I can imagine that. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Jeremy Kyle in just a couple of minutes. But first, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning those elusive Oasis tickets for Wembley this summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
It is. Jeremy Kyle is here.
Sorry, can I just say, I didn't realise because you last
You're not
week...
plugged in, by the way. Your mic.
Sorry. It's really Look at that.
But because you've got a good
face.
projecting voice. I mean, Amy.
I can project my voice, dear.
Amy throwing the evils.
Why is he throwing the evils? He looks like he's been in rehab. Anyway, we're back. He looks tired. Anyway, you've been on holiday. So last week there was this sort of... David was here, all flamboyant, you know, coloured shirts, very tight across the front. And I thought you were just having some time at home because I left you a voice message.
You left me a voice message?
This is brilliant because I'm in the car. Tell what the voice message was.
The voice... So... Mr. and Mrs. K are in the car together.
We were, yeah.
You are listening to a down-market radio station.
I don't quite know what happened, but we were in the Midlands, I think. Was it?
And
who's it called?
I can't remember what the station was.
What was the name of the DJ?
Richard Allenson.
Oh, Richard Allenson. Yes. So I'm
former Radio 2 and all the rest of it.
So Victoria says, and I quote, "He's got a nice voice." So he does have a fantastic radio voice, to which she quite seriously went, "Not a patch on Ian, though."
Vic, I still love you.
What do you mean still?
Sorry.
You've been on holiday, you went skiing. I love this. He comes in, he's got a brown face and white hands, so he's obviously worn gloves and sat après ski like that.
As you do, as you do.
He's gone, "We're not skiers." Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I had a great time. Yeah,
Great
we went
for the kids.
That was exactly it, okay? Bulgaria is very cheap. It was the last week of the season. I'm only...
You're such a tight gear, aren't you?
No, but it was a...
Take him to Val d'Isère and push the boat out.
It was a last-minute kind of thing, and we thought, OK, let's give that a go.
It's great. How old are the kids?
It was, well, you know, they're 6 and 11.
Yeah, I do know. Yeah. So did they enjoy it? Because getting them, that's right. They're getting them into it.
Yeah. Well, the 6-year-old was a little bit hesitant at first. He just wanted to build snowmen. Of course he did. You know, you wanted to play in the snow. Did you ski? Did you advance to? Well, I'm kind of Olympic standard, so it's fine. You know, with these legs, I can crouch and move like you've never seen.
Talking about legs and stability, how was Mrs. Collins? Did she do well?
She did all right, actually.
Low centre of gravity.
No, she went down like a beauty. That's the.
I knew our wives had a lot in common.
Stop it! Stop it! I was.